medical education, who's the primary funder? Big pharma. So physicians need to wake up. Doctors, wake up.
Take out the red guy, put in the blue guy. You know, they're always arguing about the symptoms, but they're never getting beneath it. There's never a fundamental change from a political solution, ever.
Why do I determine my net worth based on the things I have and money? And since money is corrupt and changeable, so is morality.
My hope is that the technology gets more out of the way rather than more immersive.
It seems like we're moving in that direction because people want to escape from reality.
You know, we haven't had a hyperinflation in the US.
No.
Right?
And the corruption is so hidden here.
Yes.
And the propaganda and the games, the mind games. You don't know what to believe.
But the pain is becoming more acute since the pandemic.
A lot of people think that Bitcoin is a side quest, but people don't realize that Bitcoin is the main quest.
Oh, yeah. So we're just looking at this image you shared with me, which was comparing the Myers-Briggs personality type distribution among the general population versus Bitcoiners. And we'll put the image on the screen here too, but there's this very heavy slant towards certain personality types under the Myers-Briggs typology that are overly represented in Bitcoin populations and underrepresented in normie populations, so no coiner populations.
Right.
And yeah, this makes sense because I myself test. I typically come in as either an INTJ or an ENTJ. I've taken the test a few different times.
Right.
And sure enough, INTJ is the most highly represented personality type among Bitcoiners at 29%.
Yeah. But only 2.1% of the general population.
But only 2.1% of the general population, exactly. ENTJ is also overrepresented, 7.6% Bitcoiners, 1.8% general population. What do you think is going on here? What is it about these personality types that lend themselves to becoming Bitcoiners?
Well, this is fascinating stuff. And, you know, the first thing I would say is that this is somewhat of a soft science. And there's people who study psychiatry, psychology, who have PhDs, who are quick to point out that studies and research, there needs to be a lot more work done here. But that being said, when we take personality tests, we fall into these different boxes. I'm ENFP, actually. And, different personality types tend to select for different jobs and different functions and roles inside society and inside of the whole human condition, right? So doctors are more predominantly a certain type of personality. Right. And even within medicine, orthopedic physicians, surgeons, you can think of these personality types, and I'm an ER doc. Of course, I've got motorcycles, and I'm kind of like a free thinker and an adventurous. So you'll see these personality types manifest in different types of people. So when we look at this chart, it's pretty interesting, and it's just a suggestion that more work could be done. But if you look, ISFJ, ESFJ, these are 0% Bitcoiners. But they're the most common in the general population type of people. And I did a little bit of deeper digging with this, and guess what type of personalities, what kind of job functions these types of people have in society. And it's politicians, CEOs.
Anti-Bitcoiners.
Typically people who are harder to orange pill, right? Yeah. And so this led me to just think, we're all kind of part of the Bitcoin marketing department. And it kind of led me to think, well, this is the low hanging fruit. And maybe we're getting the messaging, maybe it's more of an echo chamber, and we're talking to each other as INTJs and ENFPs and INTPs. And, we're already overrepresented. Yeah. So I asked Saylor what personality type was. He didn't get back to me, but I assume he's INTJ.
Yeah, I think he's one of the two for sure.
So, this is interesting. I think that, and we were just talking about this before we started, the whole of humanity, like all of us individually, kind of contribute to the human consciousness as if we were each like a neuron or like a focal idea point. Right. And so you were talking about, what was the term you used, the Greek term?
Oh yeah, I was initially reflecting on, it makes a lot of sense that there is this distribution of personality types among people, because if you do take that viewpoint of us as a collective organism, right, as like a super organism, humanity, society, whatever you want to call it, it stands to reason that there needs to be a somewhat stable core, right? Like the things that we have learned across the longest spans of time, we need to hold on to those lessons at the core of that superorganism.
Right.
But we also need experimentation around the edges, right? So we can adapt to an ever-changing reality. And it's the dynamic tension between those two things, which the ancient Greeks use the word tonos.
Tonos.
It's like the dynamic tension between opposites that allows there to be truth discovery or creativity, or basically a tension that leads to creation, right? It's there's also the term used called opponent processing. And so this manifests in a lot of different domains, right? You could think about liberals and conservatives, right? Well, literally conservatives are that core. They're trying to conserve old traditional values, and liberals tend to be more experimental and free thinking and, liberal, basically at the edges. Yes, in the classical sense of the words, not in the modern fiat sense.
Right.
Even a star, right? A star is an explosion that's balanced out with its gravity. And so it's like, it's not an organism per se, but a star does have a life cycle. And
it might be.
It might be, right? It's hard to say where we draw the line. And so we see this throughout nature, basically, that there's these forms of opponent processing that allow things to be what they are. Even the muscles in your arm, like when you move your arm, the muscles are counterbalancing one another to give you this fine movement.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Triceps
and so it's
biceps,
a principle. Yeah, it's a principle of reality that's not only physical, psychological, astronomical, all these things.
So, and that's really interesting, because we find that in kind of all natural systems, it seems like, as you're kind of alluding to. And I think that, kind of taking this full circle to personality types, I think all of humanity has a personality type. Like if you looked, and I think that you're right. It's kind of that dynamic tension that keeps things, maybe checks and balances. And maybe that's true within our own minds as well, and why we fall in these different personality boxes. At our cores, we each have some kind of dynamic tension within us. And maybe that's partially what defines our morality, and our adherence to a set of ideals.
Yes.
And also the fact that as humans and imperfect beings, we're frequently morally flexible.
Yeah.
And I think the current paradigm, the current system actually incentivizes moral flexibility and in some cases moral turpitude, or like immorality, which is unfortunate and maybe no longer necessary as we approach an age of abundance. But, I think that thinking about how we just improve everything, I have a 13-year-old, he's a good boy. And at this point, I've had Bitcoin for 10 years and I just want to make I want to be a part of the solution in making the world a better place. And, it's part of the reason why I think we talk about this stuff, because as Bitcoiners, we kind of feel that draw into a more egalitarian future that just kind of lifts everybody up.
For sure.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And again, if you're taking that viewpoint of us as a collective organism, it stands to reason that's a deep motivation for us, right? To serve the collective. And I want to be very careful with language here, because this is also the language that demagogues use, right? Like, you need to give up your property rights for the greater good, or, you need to do this for the betterment of society. And it's like, only on a consensual basis. I don't think you should ever be willingly coerced. I don't know if that's even possible, but you shouldn't give in to coercion or statist aggression against your private property or civil liberties for the greater good. That's someone manipulating your compassion circuitry and using it against you, basically. However, if you can actually do things, right, like discover a technological breakthrough or something else that really serves humanity, build a business of value, or even just raising children, as you're saying, right, giving them good values and morals to go out and serve others, there is deep fulfillment to be found there, perhaps only found there. It's like living life beyond yourself.
And maybe our function sometimes is dissent. Maybe our function, I love the phrase, the trope that we throw around, right? Like, we are all Satoshi, right? And So we are part of an organism, the human organism.
Yeah.
And that give and take, that tension, the argumentation, the discussion, it's important. And I've been thinking a lot about this recently, like Bitcoin and Fiat as their own derivative thought structures or organisms. Much like the human mind and society at large are organisms. You can think of them as organisms, or just complex, organized structures. It's the same with Bitcoin and Fiat as, they might be ideas, they might be, whatever you want to call them. They're actually like living, breathing things that have immune responses. They have defense. They have, and it's interesting to see, these structures coincide with our minds and with the human mind at large, and see what's accepted, what's, because it's all a big experimentation. It's all like Darwinism on some level. It's like moving towards something that's more beneficial, some kind of adaptation that helps us and everybody. The end goal, I think, is how can we make everybody as happy, as healthy as possible all together. Like that seems like that should be a combined goal that most humans would want. But I think there's a lot of different ideas of how do we get there. And I think most people are thinking within the current paradigm and arguing within the current paradigm about solutions to problems. I'm an ER doctor, so we could talk about medicine, but I think that thinking about solutions to problems within the current paradigm, within any current paradigm, is like sitting in the passenger seat of a car, pushing on the dashboard and expecting the car to move.
Exactly.
You got to
get outside of the system.
You got to get outside of the system and get a new car. And get in the driver's seat. And Bitcoin does that. I think that when most people are looking for solutions to anything that is a derivative of the current paradigm, they're trying to push the car from the inside. And so it's fascinating to be where we're at, because I think we're at the end where people are realizing the car is broken. And finally there's a new car.
Right.
So cool.
No, that echoes something Einstein said, right? You can never find solutions to problems from the same level that the problems were created. You need the meta step. You need to be able to step outside the system, have the higher perspective on it. And then you can see, you get a comprehensive view, basically. Then you can solve things from the root. Right? Rather than just hacking at the leaves, the proverbial leaves.
It's Thomas Kuhn, like the theory of scientific revolutions. It's the same thing.
And also that saying, for every 1,000 hacking at the leaves, there's but one strike at the root, right? Like people are always talking about the symptoms and the problems and, it's not, take out the red guy, put in the blue guy. They're always arguing about the symptoms, but they're never getting beneath it. Like what is all this democracy bullshit anyways, right? And Bitcoin, I think this is where it's such a phenomenal thing, because it does incentivize us to take that meta step, right? Like you ask yourself, what is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is money. And then you get, what is money? And then that becomes this rabbit hole that this whole show is based on. And it touches everything. And there is this ideological Darwinism that's taking place, right? That it's, what did Jung say? That people don't have ideas, but ideas have people. So it's as if these ideas are actually competing to recruit us in a way. And the paradigm of fiat is a zero-sum game mentality, right? Like my gain is your loss, basically, right? I print money and steal your purchasing power. I go to war and conquer your country. I propagate fake news and propaganda to control your mind. Like it's very zero-sum, very treats people in a dehumanizing way. And then there's this opposite emergent paradigm in Bitcoin that's very positive sum, right? It's like, do everything based on consent, have a monetary system where nothing can be hidden, right? There's no opacity. It's purely transparent. It's open source. Incentivize people, or I guess remove the incentive for coercion and violence, because it makes it very difficult. It's a money that's very difficult to extract from people by force. So all of a sudden statism and these other forms of coercion and compulsion become less profitable and therefore less prevalent. So it is this, and then we're back to the personality thing. It's like the first people to adopt that new ideology tend to be of a certain personality type.
Right.
You know, we talked about the Myers-Briggs, but there's also the Big Five personality, where I saw that Bitcoiners tend to be very high in openness and very low in agreeability. Right. And which I too score for that. I have like a 92% openness and a 1% agreeability.
Up there also.
Yeah. So, and which makes sense, right? It's a new thing. You have to have the courage and fortitude to be able to say, no, you're all wrong. Like all 99.9% of you.
Yeah.
This is right. Right. Like I need to be disagreeable enough to do that. And then I also need to be open-minded enough to approach these ideas with a beginner's mindset in the first place.
There's probably a Gaussian distribution, like a normal distribution between us kind of being at the tip of the spear for this sort of thing, jumping blindly into this brave new, you know, kind of world. Funny to use that, but and then on the backside, at the very tail of the spear, people, you know, kind of holding back, saying, "Hold on, be careful. There might be fire and spikes and danger there, and you might kill us all." And it's again comes back to that tonos or that like that dynamic tension. I have a theory about why, and it's probably not original, but I've been thinking a lot about this, which is, you know, for hundreds of thousands of years, we slowly went from cave people to you know, and we were basically animals at some point, right? And there was probably a moment, probably coincided with fire or other things. You know, that kind of changed us into our more human form. But then we still had a period of 30, 40,000 years or whatever it is, where everything was really hard. We lived to be 30 or 40 years old on average. We died of infection. A third of women died in childbirth. Yeah. You know, being a doctor, we had no antibiotics.
That's right. Yeah.
The neighboring tribe, by the way, they were going to come kill you, rape your women, take your children. Yeah. And, you know, a new winter was coming. You'd see a solar eclipse, and then now the gods are angry with you. And then, you know, everything that, and there was a drought, you lose half your tribe. Yeah. You know, it rains for 2 weeks, half the people get pneumonia and die. So everything has always been hard. Nature has been hard. It's hard for animals. Yeah. And now we're seeing these in these chairs. And like, I mean, it's amazing, right? Yeah. But I think what happened is money is at its base, you know, a million different things, right? But it's a social contract, and it's a glue that holds society, whether it's a tribe or a larger structure, together, and offers a way for people to exchange value and all those things. Yeah. And everything has been a proxy for an actual, you know, truth, an actual truth machine, like Bitcoin is. Until now, everything has been a changing meter stick that benefits certain parts of society better. Yeah. And I think because times were always hard, the structure that we built for the system of money itself is born out of scarcity mentality and fear. And things are going to get bad, and winter's coming, and I'm going to get pneumonia. My family's going to die. I'm going to die. Everything's going to die. I need to save money and build and hoard and greed. And so people are incentivized to war with other tribes, but now it's financially. And so, you know, I don't really blame anybody for the moral turpitude, which is, you know, now everybody's a liar and cheater because they want to save money on taxes. And, you know, in the problems in medicine, I mean, it's unbelievable. But politicians, all our politicians have $180 million, but they don't earn that much. Right. And like everything is corrupt. And it's all corrupt because the money system's corrupt, because it's all based on scarcity mentality, fear, this cutthroat PvP mechanics, competition, and everything comes out. All of our other structures come out of that. And so, I mean, I think that's, I'm curious what you think.
Deception, right?
Yeah,
like the key point, in my view, is this: when you create debt-based money, right, which is what fiat currency is, it's born, literally loaned into existence. Well, money cannot be an extinguisher of debt if it is debt-based, right? You can never extinguish the liability that is inherent to that dollar that the Federal Reserve lent the US government into existence.
Right.
And by the way, lent it into existence in exchange for the shitcoin called US Treasury that the government produces ad infinitum. So it's literally a deceptive circle jerk. And so what is born from that deception is all of this moral turpitude, as you call it, right? Like you get not only the means to fund fake news and propaganda, but also the means to fund the killing, and so you get the means to fund it, but then you also have the motivation to do it, right? If you can conquer more countries and expand your tax base further, then that lie actually becomes more and more profitable as it grows.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be this like almost metaphysical problem you run into when you try to create, because the idea of money is that we want it to be a fair and unchangeable set of rules that we can exchange favors through, right? Because of the simple reality that we are more productive and prosperous in cooperation than we are in zero-sum competition, right? Now peaceful competition's okay. You know, you want producers competing to deliver better, faster, cheaper solutions to consumers. That's what makes markets function.
Sports. There's virtuous competition.
Sports is another great example of nonviolent competition, right? We all enjoy it. We appreciate it. We pay to go watch it. And, you know, it wouldn't be football anymore if people started shooting each other on the field, right? Like the game would devolve.
Right.
And so we need to find, it's basically like we play games with one another, right? And games being, there are rules in place, there are objectives, and what are the right games to play that increase our chances or move us closer towards human flourishing, right? Which is creating more economic prosperity and abundance.
And should be the ultimate goal, right?
And should be, but there's this element of fear, right? So when the United States wins World War II, it gives itself the privilege to print money and externalize all that inflation onto other countries, because there's this innate fear that we won't have enough. And so we may need to steal from these other countries that we've just conquered at some point. So it's like we as humans couldn't do it ourselves. We couldn't get out of our own incentive trap of trying to scam and steal and conquer and control one another. So we needed a technological solution to that problem. We needed the permanent level playing field that no one can corrupt or change.
Yeah.
And that is the mystery and gift of Satoshi.
Yeah.
And it's radical. It's radical to think how much that changes us.
And it's a process, right? And I think being at that kind of proverbial tip of the spear, we get to see all of that. But when you're inside the system, you look for problems and solutions at that meta layer that's built upon the foundation, the corrupt foundation. And so it's I think sometimes frustrating as Bitcoiners to be like, come on guys, you got to come over here. It's like beautiful. And like, we could all be happy together and everybody can do better. And, you know, we'll live to be 500 and let's embrace technology. And then, you know, 99% of people are like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
But it, you know, I mean, philosophically, if you change incentives at the most basic level, and I think it really is only now that it's possible because of the technological abundance that technology, that it creates, right? Like it's so deflationary. And I mean, in 5 to 10 years, our jobs are probably going to be gone. I speak to radiologists now, my colleagues, and the AI reads films better than they do.
Sure.
And, you know, dermatologists, you take a picture of a little lesion and it's not going to be long before Optimus is going to be taking out your appendix or whatever.
Right.
And, you know, at some point human jobs kind of go away. And so, you know, I just am finishing up this work that I'm circulating. I'm revising and it's a new book and it's called Self-Bitcoinization. And it's about the process of self-actualizing through Bitcoin. And it's funny because I speak to, you know, no coiners or normies, and it's like inside I almost feel like this, I feel their eye roll. I feel the scoff.
Yeah, of course.
And you know, but I'm proposing a bunch of arguments on, you know, you always see people get into Bitcoin and then they lose 50 pounds and they adopt a low time preference, which is just long-term thinking, right? and they start focusing on their health and they're eating right, they're eating steak, and they're, they're growing as a person. And Abraham Maslow is a famous psychologist, up there with Freud and Erickson, and he talked about self-actualization, and it's based on a hierarchy of needs, which is like it's this kind of displayed in a triangle, which shows like you need food and water as your first need. And then there's these kind of meta layers of needs that are built upon that. And once you have food and water, okay, well then you need shelter. You need a roof over your head. And once you have that, okay, now you need like stability in your relationships. And then above that, there's love. You get love. And then, and then at the very pinnacle of the triangle, he describes self-actualization, which is kind of like Nietzsche's Übermensch.
Yes.
And it's something that it's kind of like an enlightenment, and something that people, you can think of it as like an authenticity or as a genuineness of like when you're truly yourself, and then and you're pursuing more noble type of growth of character and spirit for not only yourself but for everyone. That's self-actualization. And Maslow postulated that after doing all these studies, that maybe 1% of us are self-actualized. And who knows, maybe it's 0.1%, maybe it's 3%, but it's a small amount.
Yeah.
And I think that Bitcoin, one of the very interesting things about Bitcoin is as it realigns incentives and as it shows us our own moral deficiencies, because we adapt, and we spoke about this a little bit, we adapt to the kind of container that we're in. And when we're in the fiat container, look, I don't blame people for going and shitcoining and trying to make money, because it's like a dog eat dog world, and it's like hard. And if you're struggling if you only have $500 in your account and you're struggling to make ends meet and you're working 3 jobs, the system has failed you. Clearly.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to be self-actualizing. All you care about is, do you have enough money if somebody gets sick? And by the way, healthcare has bankrupted you, which is like infuriating as a physician, and as a Bitcoiner, like it's unconscionable, unacceptable. And I'm really impassioned about that.
Yeah.
But before putting kind of a bow on this, I think that changing and aligning the incentives at the base layer, the money layer, the value layer. How much is your time worth? How much is my time worth? How much is our skill sets worth? It's fine to define what that's worth. Like I'm a doctor, I'm worth like 3 value units, you're you're the president, you're worth 8 value, you're the CEO, you're worth 12 value units, whatever, that's fine. There's going to be different values. But I think the problem is when that yardstick changes and the value accretes towards the top, vis-a-vis the Cantillon effect. So if we make that yardstick so that it's always the same and defined mathematically by truth, and is truthful, and it never changes, then you finally have something to work with.
Yes.
As a human species. And I don't think we have ever had that.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever wanted to live in an off-grid community with complete food, energy, and water independence? If so, then you need to check out the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a pioneering community designed to foster longevity and well-being, eliminating elements that detract from these goals. At the farm, the convergence of nature, nutritious food, a supportive community, and the ethos of slowing down is unparalleled. Positioned at the gateway to the UNESCO World Heritage nominated Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the farm at Okefenokee stands as a testament to a lifestyle that truly nurtures health and happiness. Unlike conventional housing developments where a token communal garden may suffice, the farm itself is the community. Small, intimate micro-villages seamlessly integrate into the fabric of a sprawling agricultural community. So if you're interested in joining this off-grid community, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about becoming a member. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on their custom cabin pricing. Again, go to okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. Standards, right? Just like the same way we use the metric system to standardize our relationship to space and to time, we need to standardize our relationships to one another economically. And it's on those standards that we can build really robust structures. And so this is, I'm glad you bring up Maslow's hierarchy, because this, I think, is the connection between economics and self-actualization. As you're describing at the base of that pyramid, right, our most basic needs, food, water, shelter, right? This is what economics provides us, right?
Yeah,
like through the division of labor, we create more food, water, shelter per unit of human labor when we cooperate. When we coerce one another, it goes in the opposite direction. We create, and God forbid, we go to war, right? Where we're actually destroying food, shelter, water to kill one another, right? It's like, it's anti-economic. It is in cooperation that we more adequately provide for the base layer of Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization
for everyone,
and therefore provide more upward mobility or more liberty or luxury or freedom, whatever you want to call it, to ascend that hierarchy. It doesn't make you, it doesn't mean like if you're rich, you're going to be self-actualized, but it does mean you have the means to spend the time in leisure or study or practice, whatever it is that you need to self-actualize. You have the capacity to do that. Now, in a non-Bitcoin world where money is being printed to fund warfare and fund fake news and steal from people, you are crushing the bottom of that hierarchy, right? You are inhibiting people's ability to ascend it.
Right.
And in a Bitcoinized world where the money does not steal from you, and in fact, it's very unprofitable to steal from people because it's difficult to do so, right? There's a big cost and a very low payoff, that we create more and more of that base of the triangle or the pyramid.
Yeah.
And therefore more and more upward mobility for individuals to move towards self-actualization.
Right.
So it's not join our cult, we're all self-actualized and you're not. This is like solving the basic economic premise of stop stealing and killing from one another, right? We can proclaim it, but people act according to incentives, not laws, basically. So you can codify it in law, you do all the things you want, but if people aren't incentivized to be cooperative, they're not going to be cooperative, right? People are going to exploit whatever advantages they have. And so by cementing this do not steal, do not kill idea in code, we actually create very firm foundations for each of us to ascend closer to self-actualization.
Exactly.
And that is, I mean, that's the connection, right? It's economic in its foundations. It's not economic in its conclusions. That's the self-work and all, things you have to do for yourself, basically. Right. Integrating the Jungian shadow, right? Making the unconscious patterns that control your behavior conscious to you and resolving them. Like, these are all components or aspects of becoming individually free. But you can't even get into that luxurious domain of exploring your shadow and doing inner work until you have your basic needs met. Right. So on Bitcoin, we're just saying, like, here's the structure that solves the most basic needs for the most people for all time.
There you go. It's that simple. And think about like building a building, right?
Yeah.
Like a huge skyscraper. Yes. Would you use like, you know, shitty concrete and mud and like as the foundational layer? No, you're going to use the best steel framing, and you need to build a good foundation because everything is built on a foundation. Yeah. That's what a foundation is.
This is biblical, right? It's building the house on sand or on stone. Yeah.
And to bring it to a real world kind of example, think of how many IQ 160 super geniuses are all over the world. We got 8 billion people. We enjoy the exorbitant privilege we do because of Triffin's dilemma and our global reserve currency. And we have enslaved the rest of the world. Yeah. And even in our country, there's people living on the streets. And I guarantee you there's people with IQ 160 who could be like Einstein level, you know, like engineers or whatever, contributing to society that can't even get their basic needs met.
Sure.
You know, and weren't built with, you know, to use the modern parlance, you know, privilege and which is a dangerous word, but it goes both ways. You know, like I think a lot of these words are demonized, but I think that all these human thought structures are valid and worth considering because again, that's what creates that dynamic tension.
Yes.
And the interplay between all our personality types and how we get things done. Now, the thing about Bitcoin is it's being adopted faster than the internet. And it is, if you look at the hash rate, if you look at the health, if you look at the ETFs, if you look at you know, we've been many cycles now. Yeah. We go back, like for me, 2015. And like to see how far it's come and to see how quickly it's being adopted, there's no question where it's going. It's an unstoppable force at this point. So it's like exciting. I just want it to happen, you know, quicker, just so that we can build up everybody off that base layer and fix medicine because, you know, that's my field. Because I practice medicine not for money, you know, and I don't practice that much these days anymore. You know, I do like a week a month, but I still enjoy it. But it is so frustrating, you know, what's wrong within the current system because of the current system. So anyways, I digress.
Yeah, I've seen a chart that's relevant to that, I'm sure, is like since 1971, since going off the gold standard, the ratio of administrators in healthcare to providers in healthcare has absolutely exploded, right? Like,
oh my gosh.
I mean, I want to say it's like gone up 1,000x, you know, like whatever that, it's a staggering number. And basically it's like, look, of course you need administration in any business, but the idea is to minimize administration. Administration is this operational fixed cost you want to drive down as the business grows. You want to, providers are the ones actually providing goods and services. The administrators are just connecting the buyers and sellers in an informationally efficient way. And this, like, again, to try to tie this back to the hierarchy, it's incentives, right? When we reward non-productive labor, and we penalize productive labor, don't be surprised when you get a lot of bullshit jobs that are non-productive. They're just siphoning off of the productive output of the human race, not adding anything back.
Right.
And so you could look at that as, you know, the overgrowth of federal 3-letter agencies. You could look at this as the administrator to healthcare provider ratio exploding. It's across industries, right? And so all of that is rooted in this bureaucratic administrative state that money printing fosters, right? It just allows this cancers, you know, if I may use that metaphor, it allows these cancers to grow. And what is a cancer? It's a cell that, or a set of cells that grows without any self-destruction or self-correction, right? There's no check or balance on the growth.
And it can be an idea. It can be a metastatic organism, like a bureaucracy.
Yes. Whereas in capitalism, we enjoy, you know, what Schumpeter called creative destruction. If the thing is not profitable, well, then those cells or that capital gets recycled back into the economy and put to higher and better use that's profitable in accordance with the preferences of individuals.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's very interesting. And again, it all stems from, as a natural derivative from the base layer. Because if the state controls the money, then the state gets more and more money. It's incentivized to grow wealthy itself.
And you're rewarding non-productive people.
You're rewarding
people that steal from people.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're rewarding and growing a cancer. You're feeding it sugar, basically.
Exactly.
So, you know, the problems in the current paradigm are shocking and have people so distraught. And people who are inside the current paradigm who are not Bitcoiners yet have despair.
Sure.
And to wit,
Yeah.
physicians have twice the suicide rate of the general population.
Wow.
And I have colleagues, I had a colleague just shoot himself a couple weeks ago. And
why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Is it?
It's moral injury. It's most of us are physicians because we want to help people. You don't give up your 20s and study you don't do this for like a little, you know, for some money. If you go into medicine for money, like, you know, it's hard. Most people don't make it very far because it's a very hard job.
Yeah.
You know, you got your hands up people's ass. I mean, it's, you know, it's like
sure.
You every smell, you know, you're dealing with things cut off and like, especially in my world, you know, I like oh man, the amount of people I've seen shot through you know, through the throat, through the face, through everything, stabbed, you know, like just after a 20-year career in the emergency department, I can't even like I wish I could Vulcan mind meld, like you wouldn't want it, you know, like it gives you a very different perspective on life, but doing that, you know, it takes a special kind of person to go into that. Sure. And we have a bunch of different personalities, and certain personalities on the Myers-Briggs become surgeons and certain become ER docs, you know. I've got motorcycles and I'm like the stereotypical ER doc. I'm a rock climber. But, you know, we all go into it maybe not all, but most people go into medicine for more noble reasons. You know, we want to help people.
Right.
I was 2 years old. I wanted to go into medicine. And the reason why I think that the suicide rate is double now is because when we give our oath, the oath is primum non nocere, you know, first do no harm.
Yeah.
And so we give this oath to first do no harm, and our goal is to not harm patients. And then we're complicit, either wittingly or unwittingly, in a system that is the number one cause of bankrupting people and causing financial ruination. Well, what do you think happens to someone's health if they're bankrupted by medicine? So they come in and they see me in the ER. I do a CAT scan. I say, I'm so sorry, you have cancer. You need to follow up with the oncologist. And then they go to the oncologist and okay, well, we're going to start chemo. And then they start getting the bills and insurance, and they don't have insurance because insurance premiums are ridiculous because the insurance companies are about as morally corrupt as you can get.
Sure.
And then guess what? Now they're bankrupt. They can't leave any money to their children. They feel like a failure. Society has taken away, or medicine, you know, or healthcare in general has taken away all their value. And so as physicians, we have played a role in this morally corrupt healthcare system. Right. And yeah, we're really good at providing the healthcare. And you know, when I say it's unwittingly for a lot of us, it's because we like suppress it psychologically.
Yeah.
We don't know what the costs are. Like when I sew someone up, let's say a little kid gets bit in the face by a dog or something, and I'm sewing them up. I put them on antibiotics. You know, their lip is open all the way, and I sew them up and send them out on the plastic. I have no idea what that costs.
Sure.
And they keep that away from us on purpose.
Of course. And
then they make us bill and code. Well, they don't make us bill. They make us code what we did and how long was the suture. And they've got complex formulas. They don't tell the patient how much it's going to cost. Insurance carriers are incentivized to increase premiums because there's laws that say they can only take profits from 15% of the premiums.
Right.
So what do you think they're going to do? Like, it's all incentives. They're going to increase the premiums. They're going to keep going up. So the CEO gets more money. The shareholder gets more money. Meanwhile, physicians we make less and less and less money every year, which whatever, we keep practicing. We don't care. Our healthcare costs for physicians are only 7%. Our salaries are only 7% of all of the healthcare costs in this country.
Crazy.
All you need are patients and doctors.
Yeah.
And very good nurses and support staff, and then some suture material or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that coming full circle, we are frustrated. And not only that, now we're on top, to add insult to injury, of course, physicians are demonized. And in some cases, rightly so, because of the COVID shenanigans and stuff that I don't even want to get into, nor, you know, like that's a crazy societal, like dealing with this new crazy phenomenon of COVID. But there's been a lot of loss of trust for what was once the most noble profession. You know, people trust lawyers now more than they trust physicians.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, and it gets back to this idea that, well, we say in Bitcoin, fix the money, fix the world.
Yeah.
And obviously the flip side of that is corrupt money destroys the world, right?
Yeah.
It destroys everything that it touches, which is almost everything. And to go back to your idea of like Bitcoin and fiat as these different organisms begs the question, like, well, what is an organism? And, you know, you described all of this entropy that we're contending with all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like all of the harshness of nature, the natural economic scarcity. You know, poverty is the norm, by the way. And people say, like, what causes poverty? It's like, poverty is the natural state. We appeared here in poverty.
Right.
What you have to ask yourself is, what creates economic prosperity?
Right.
And what creates economic prosperity are these social contracts, like, you know, private property. I'm going to pretend that everything of value that you create, you have the exclusive rights to, in the hope that you will reciprocate that pretending. And then in doing so, we can trade goods with one another and increase the division of labor and all of these things. And so it's almost like, if we are a collective organism, money is the lifeblood that coheres that organism, right? It's what allows us to push back entropy further, right? Which is another way of saying accumulate more savings, more capital, more buffers against the uncertainties of time and nature.
Yeah.
And if our blood is poisoned, right, with uncertainty, right, it needs to be maximally certain. If it's poisoned with the uncertainty of theft and inflation and war and capital controls and all these other things, then it's not doing its job, right? The collective organism has a blood disease, if I may use that metaphor. Yeah. And so that's what we're saying with Bitcoin. Like, it's something that is so foundational and essential. Like, you have to purify the blood of the collective organism if you want any of its institutional or business realities to be healthy.
Yeah, it's kind of like an antibiotic for the current disease. You know, I've been thinking about this, and this is interesting. I'm eager to get your thoughts, because I get a little bit of pushback on this. You know, Bitcoiners in specific, have all sorts of thoughts about ETFs and whether or not this is good for Bitcoin, or this is good or bad for Bitcoin, or the strategic digital, you know, the digital stockpile, and oh my gosh, XRP and all this stuff. You know, why are they putting this garbage in when there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else, you know, which is all grift and scam. And then you've got this one thing that's like, dude, we've got it. It's amazing. This is the answer. Like, why are you even playing around? And this is all still in like fiat paradigm, scarcity mindset, PvP, you know, who's going to win. So when I think of Bitcoin as an organism, and what we've been discussing, organisms go through an evolutionary process, right? And they have immune systems, and they have defense mechanisms. And the stronger an organism, and a lot of times we say, you know, Bitcoin DGAF, right? Like, it's going to do what it's going to do, and it doesn't need us. You know, like, Bitcoin's going to happen. And we think about that. But then in the same breath, a lot of us, myself included, sometimes look at like, do we really want BlackRock owning all this Bitcoin? And what my current thought process is that Bitcoin as an organism has an immune response. It has defense capabilities. It has everything it needs as a fledgling child to grow into a world dominating idea that is better for everyone. And as such, I think it needs to experience all of these challenges. And I think that there's almost like I don't believe things were like written or fated, so to speak, but I think like all of this is a natural evolution.
Right.
And so like you want to talk about quantum computing, bring it on. I mean, Bitcoin needs that.
Sure.
How do you think a kid, you know, when you're a child and your immune system is immature, how do you think you know, like my kid, he's picking stuff off the ground and eating it. I'm like, yeah, good. You know,
sick,
like, I still have the 10-second rule. You know, like how do you think our immune systems get stronger? Like it's okay to eat stuff off the ground. It's okay to not shower for a week, honestly. It's like these things are actually, people look at them as crazy, but as organisms, we are healthier because of the environment and because of that evolutionary process. And so Bitcoin's going through an evolutionary process. And I think that, you know, all these little micro internal arguments amongst Bitcoiners, I think they're kind of moot because I think that all of this is just, you know, the fork wars and everything that happened have naturally selected for maximal decentralization, maximal security, you know, and if we wanted to, you know, if the organism needed to select for maximal privacy, maybe it would have done that. But I think, you know, the human, the mass, like on average, net of humanity isn't prioritizing that as like one of the mandatory parts of it all. Right. You know, and solutions may come that because maybe it evolves into that. So I've been thinking about that a little bit recently.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And the beautiful thing about it and what makes it very organic is that Bitcoin really is just that consensus cluster, right? It's like whatever the preferences of the individual participants in the network are, they cluster into the thing that is Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, like a school of fish.
Yeah, exactly. And then if that,
it's a murmuration,
and it's like a murmuration, and it's also kind of like it's like a nucleation of a cell in a way. And then there can be a division, right? Like the block wars of 2017. Well, part of that consensus cluster can break off. And say, oh no, we want bigger blocks for, you know, whatever the reason. We all know it was to compromise decentralization, but they were saying, no, you need to be able to buy coffee or whatever in the fuck. And then let that happen. Let that Darwinism play out. And then we did, right?
And guess what? Two competing systems, and this cell ended up, you know, having apoptosis, which is like cell death.
Exactly. This consensus cluster survives and this one dies. And the Darwinian process continues on. And there will probably be other ones to come, right? But there was a trade-off made. There's a design trade-off between having a fixed supply and having perfect privacy on the base layer. You basically can't have both, right? Because you need to be able to audit the total supply and verify that there's only 21 million.
Yeah, it's a trilemma.
Well, you can't square that with perfect privacy, right? Which is something like what Monero does. So the consensus cluster decided fixed money supply, 0% inflation money matters more than perfect privacy. We can solve perfect privacy at higher layers.
Yeah. But also, I mean, think about it. Like, if we change incentives and base layer and we are incentivized to have moralization of society, then okay, if you want privacy, okay, but do you know, like, I mean, you maybe use a different tool for it, and that'll be like a very small amount of people, but maybe it'll be less and less people, because I think privacy itself is perhaps a derivative of scarcity mentality and game theory and gamemanship. And like, I understand the need and want for privacy. Like, I have some gold. Before I was a Bitcoiner, I had gold and silver. I still have a safe with some gold and silver in it. I would sell it if it wasn't so damn heavy and I had, you know, to lug it to the store. But like, I understand wanting to keep that away from the state. But if you demonetize the state, and if Bitcoin, you know, and you have a small, well-oiled machine that helps with infrastructure, you don't really need defense, but you know, with maybe education, and a lot of these things are all decentralized, and we morally align, then, you know what? Yeah, maybe a very small portion of people would want privacy, but
I mean, the way
it's a right, I think, but
I look at it as an aspect of freedom, right? The ability to selectively reveal or conceal yourself or your holdings.
100%.
Like, it's an essential component of freedom. I'm not going to decide. Like, you decide for yourself if you want to be private or not. Obviously, it's a very important measure of defense against the state. I mean, this is what the state does. Actually, is it tries to break privacy and wants to make taxpayers and their activities very legible. So that they can be easily tax controlled, surveyed, et cetera. So I'm a fundamental believer in privacy as an aspect of freedom.
Do you think it comes out of this current paradigm though? Like, do you need privacy as a counter-tension force to?
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps it could be largely motivated by the existence of statism.
Because maybe you don't need privacy if everybody is like.
Well, if people aren't actually stealing from you, then you probably wouldn't care that much, right? But when the state is literally trying to breathe down everyone's neck and see exactly what they've got so they can take 40% of it, well, then you really want some privacy.
100%.
Right? So again, it's back to this incentives, the incentive structures that we inhabit.
100%. And you think about right now, how many people are hardcore want privacy, even in the current system. Even being generous, 5 or 10%. Is it that high? I don't know. I mean,
I don't know.
It's probably not. Most people are normies. They don't care about privacy. Like they don't even see the state as a problem.
Yeah.
So like then you take like the people who care, and out of those people, maybe it's 50% or less or something. If you realign all incentives, maybe that number of people who really want privacy and are paranoid, which is a good thing, because people are trying to steal from you. So like I share that characteristic and I do want privacy. But maybe on the other side of the bridge, that number of people who want privacy becomes like 0.1% or something. Yeah. And they use Monero or some other tool or a meta layer on Bitcoin that creates a solution.
Right, like Lightning Network or something. Yeah, the beautiful thing about this is like it's not really for us to decide. Again, it's up to that consensus cluster.
It's the organism growing.
Yeah, it's like let the preferences of the organism decide what they want and let it manifest in that way. Let the practice decide rather than the theory, basically. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. I want to go back to this idea, though, of life, because it seems to me like one of the most useful definitions of life is that which converts entropy into order, right? It turns chaos into order.
Yeah.
And in a universe governed by thermodynamics where everything is trending towards increasing disorder, life is this one thing that reverses the flow of entropy, right? Like it is in that thermodynamic perspective is most essentially what we are, right? We're the thing that swims up. I love G.K. Chesterton on this. He goes, a dead thing can go with the stream, but only a living thing can swim against it. Right, like we do overcome entropy, and that's what all of this is. All the order fighters. And technology and language. We're like entropy harvesters. But at the same time, we derive energy and creativity from entropy, right? Like fire, for instance, right? When fire is uncontrolled and it's purely entropic, it's the most destructive thing in the world, and we're scared to death of it. But to harness and control fire,
to focus it,
to bring it within our control, basically, to reduce its entropy, allows us to harness its energy,
Yeah.
And so that entropy then becomes useful, and it's no longer really entropy, it's energy at that point.
Right.
So, and Bitcoin's been compared to fire. You know, people think it's an innovation as profound in its implications as the harnessing of fire, which is very ancient. You know, who knows, hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. Homo erectus stood up 2 million years ago. I don't know how long we've been harnessing fire.
I mean,
it's a long time.
Amazing, yeah.
But you have this view that Bitcoin is opposite to fire.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So I think it's just as important as fire, and it's kind of, I guess let's start here. The universe is trying to understand itself, and we are the universe trying to understand itself.
Yeah.
We are only here because of supernova. You know, because out in the universe, and you know, from a very base layer layman's astrophysics point of view, when you have a star that has fusion, you only get enough heat or power to generate like elements that are 6, 7, 8, 10, you know, atomic mass. But in order to get the power to fuse something like iron or lead or these heavier elements, iron is in our heme, it's in our blood. You need a supernova. You need these ultra powerful cataclysmic, you know, astrophysical events to create the building blocks for our kind of carbon-based life. And so, you know, we are born literally of stars going supernova.
Right.
And
this star, sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
This star, all of the organic elements are manufactured in the hearts of stars, which then die and in cataclysmic explosions, seeding the universe.
Yeah.
Sorry to be funny, but it's like a cosmic ejaculation, basically. Like the thing blows up and seeds the universe with the ingredients for life.
That's great. I never even thought about it like that, but yeah, it totally is. And this is also crazy, but you know, like I think every 7 years or so, all of the atomic structure, all the atoms and molecules in our body are completely different.
Right.
You know, which is why in Star Trek they could probably use the the teleporter and just because it's amazing if you could recreate the exact like physical, like every atom to its perfect you know state of you, and right there.
Yeah.
I mean, ostensibly it would be an exact copy.
Yeah.
There's some good sci-fi to come out of that. I love sci-fi, but coming back to you know, life and entropy and the universe and stars and whatnot, I think this kind of fits together in a very interesting way. We are the universe trying to understand itself. You know, net on net, the equations that govern the physics of the universe that we've observed, delta S, entropy, you know, the second law of thermodynamics and whatnot, we know that entropy is increasing, always. But that is like a net function of the universe. So you can have these tiny localized pockets of things going the wrong way or not the unnatural way. And it's like a stream going or a river going down the mountain. Right. There's going to be eddies and there's going to be little areas where
can even flow uphill
the water can flow uphill. And you know, when you think about not only life, but you know, life gave rise to a whole new phenomenon, which was the universe, which is in our mental state, which is a universe of ideas, a universe of imagination, a universe that is like this different non-physical thing, and that's crazy. I mean, we're talking about consciousness itself, and all of the things that we're talking about today, and Bitcoin and fiat money systems and politics and health and everything that we do from the moment that we were kind of created or born or evolved, we are moving in an opposite direction to entropy, to disorganization. Yeah. And so what happens after you, what are the natural steps after you know, we coalesce into a body with a brain and all these things? Well, the natural steps is we have a brain, we're like realitometers, we're observing reality. And the natural evolution of that is to create thought structures, organized thought structures. And, you know, whether or not we discovered it or we created it, Mathematics is an obvious one. We've got two bottles, there's two bottles, and so we do math. And then the concept of zero and the concept of infinity and all these things come out of are derivatives of like a star exploding, right?
Yeah, right.
At its very most fundamental core. And ultimately, Bitcoin is such a structure, and it lives in kind of the intellectual realm, as all these things do. And whatever we think we can create in this reality, we're pretty good at creating it. So if we want a nuclear bomb, we'll create a nuclear bomb. And depending on the incentives, which I think were natural from the beginning because of when we crawled out of the sludge, we're like fighting for life. Everything has been scarcity based, and all human systems and ideas have been based on a scarcity mentality because it's all we knew. And now we're finally at this precipice where we can look over this rainbow and see, we can see an even more organized, even more perfect future where all of us benefit. Because being in the ER, I hold people bloodied after the craziest things have happened to them. And, sometimes, especially later in my career now, I was like ice cold, sang-froid, ice blooded my whole career. Because you got to be.
Sure.
Someone's shot in the face and they're like gurgling blood. I don't care. Yeah. It's an interesting challenge. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good case. And I do my thing, totally inhuman. I'm a robot.
Well, but that's in their interest, right? You don't want emotions cloud your judgment. Yeah, of course.
So now later in my career, I'm, the other week, a woman lost her husband and she was sobbing and she loved him so much. And I know true love. And I broke down, I started crying and I held her, and the longer I go in my career, it's, but seeing these things and having empathy and having compassion for another human being is how could we let anybody live? Why do we keep our base layer? Okay, you can breathe and you can have water and okay, we'll give you some food from a homeless shelter or on a house shelter or whatever. Why do we keep our base layer so low for everyone? Why are we so fundamentally focused on ourselves and self-interested and so selfish? Why are there people with $400 billion and then people with nothing? And I'm a capitalist. I'm not saying, I think that actually brought us to where we were.
Sure.
We wouldn't be here without that amazing system, even with all of its befuddlements by governments getting in the way with regulations. We don't even have true capitalism.
But of course. Yeah.
But so suffice it to say, we are organizing more complex structures of organization to improve the lot of all human beings. And I think that, people don't realize that Bitcoin, a lot of people think that Bitcoin is a side quest, but people don't realize that Bitcoin is the main quest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it is the most important revolutionary human invention, creation, advent ever, besides fire. Yeah. And so when I say that Bitcoin, and now I've come kind of full circle to it, when I say that Bitcoin is opposite of fire, well, what is fire really? Fire is the release of stored energy from the sun.
Yeah.
In the form of wood or whatever.
Yes.
Whatever is being oxidized, whatever is burning and turning into plasma and releasing energy.
Yes.
Fire.
Hopefully a controlled release, but it can also be an uncontrolled release.
It can be uncontrolled.
That's where it's a tool or a destructive force.
It can be Hiroshima.
Yeah.
Nagasaki.
Exactly.
So Bitcoin itself, though, is the tree. It's the life-giving, it's the wood. It's the potential energy.
It's the encapsulation of energy rather than the release. Yeah.
That can be released.
Yeah.
It's the perfect storage of energy for the first time ever.
Yeah.
It's and that's why, you need proof of work. It takes energy.
Sure.
Conservation of energy. You need, there's no way to to store energy
Yes.
without putting in energy.
Right.
And so
can't store what hasn't been produced, right?
So I think of the blockchain as this like long string of logs, and you can like take one and you can like burn it and turn it into, and then you can turn it into an idea, or you can turn it into a business, or you can turn it into any kind of work. And the beautiful thing is it appreciates in value, not only financial and economic value for humans, but moral value. And it moralizes us because it gives us access to ever more exchange rate for that energy.
Yes.
We get ever more, sunlight or fire out of each block.
Right.
And so it's like, and that's going to slow down and taper off, and it's probably like an asymptotic function to where it will, it's deflationary, but it will at some point even out. And then this is where I go off the deep end, but the final chapter in my book is called The Death of Money. And, I don't know. And so this is just a wild ass theory, but I think that money itself, I think money's days are numbered. And I think that Bitcoin's ultimate success will be that it will be valueless. It'll be worthless. And I think that at a certain point, you think of Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, there's no talk about money. You don't need money. Like what happens when, like right now, we have money because we need a way, because energy is expensive and scarce, and we gotta get it by huge wind turbines and nuclear reactors and whatever. We have to make energy, and everything is energy. Like we need energy to grow food. We need warmth in the wintertime. We need whatever. Energy, it's clear that energy is everything. So, when you think about it, if we win the game, like let's say we get cold fusion, or let's say we just, actually
0 point energy.
0 point energy.
Yeah.
Then why do you have to keep score if you've won the game? So like maybe at some point money becomes obsolete, because why keep score at that point? And then it gets into a whole interesting, but what about the coastal properties? They're limited.
Of course.
And there's still human desires and goals, and there's only so much land, and then and so there's a lot of questions, and it's not completely ironed out.
Of course.
But it's just an idea.
Yeah, like let's see, Bitcoin is a major revolution in and of itself, but potentially the next major revolution of that proportions would be like moving into a post-money world. And I would I somewhat agree, but here's my caveat.
I don't know. I'm not even arguing
nobody
for
knows.
it. I don't know if I agree.
We don't even know what's going to happen 6 months from now, much less 500 years from now. But if I have to speculate about it, I would agree to say 0 point, first of all, say 0 point energy is technically feasible, right? Which this is where you can just derive energy from the latent universe, basically, right? It's almost like creating a perpetual motion machine. Energy becomes free.
We harness the power of the sun.
Energy becomes free or very close to free. Let's say that's even possible, just for argument's sake. In that world, energy is the number one input to every economic process. So free energy is equal to saying like almost unlimited economic abundance. So in that world, money would at least be much less relevant, right? We wouldn't be fighting over it, and it wouldn't be such a status symbol. It would just be a basic means of communication that we all have a lot of. And when I say a lot of, we all have a lot of purchasing power because it's so abundant. However, I do think there will always be a need for money, because even if energy becomes free, we still have the scarcity of space and the scarcity of time, right? That we do need to reconcile disputes over, limited space and limited time, and who's going to do what and be where and all those things. So I would agree, if you got 0 point energy, we might be like 99% of the way there to being a post-money world, but we would still have money to resolve these disputes over things. I don't think we're going to conquer space and time. Maybe there's another breakthrough that does that, but that's my view on it.
So and I love this conversation. This is a fun conversation for me now because I'm just proposing it as like an interesting thought, like the death of money.
Yeah.
But I don't like believe in anything.
Sure.
I mean, I actually am a total optimistic nihilist. I don't really believe in anything. But what I will say though, in answer is you could steelman the case. And I will tell you that cancer right now, probably we're 10 to 15 years away from curing most, if not all, cancers. I think that our lifespan probably will be 200 to 300 years. People who are alive today, I think we're getting very close to escape velocity for longevity.
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic about the future, and I think we're on this exponential growth curve with AI and robotics and potentially super intelligence that if we live through, because there's a non-zero chance that we don't, if we live through this period, I don't, at some point we are solvable machines, like a car. If you had a good enough mechanic, you could keep a car going for as long as humanity's going. Well, you replace the carburetor. Okay, you replace the tire, you replace the engine. You can always replace stuff. Well, we're very close to me growing a liver for you in a test tube and replacing your liver, replacing your heart.
Yeah.
The brain might be the final frontier.
Sure. Yeah.
But we're almost at a point, and we can already grow ears on the back of mice. And I mean, it's going to be very soon that we can replace almost anything in your body. So I think people living to be 500, 600 years old is like, while right now that's like crazy.
Yeah.
I'm 50. When I was a kid, talking into a watch was, like a Dick Tracy watch was like, crazy. That would never happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I think we're closer than we think to, because we're on this exponential growth curve, to solving the scarcity of time and making time more abundant. And then space, well, like Saylor talks about with digital real estate, there's an unlimited amount of digital real estate. And when you improve the fidelity of virtual situations, I mean, this might all be virtual anyway. And whether or not it's recursive or base layer or like third layer or whatever, doesn't even matter. Like, have you seen the 3-body problem on Netflix?
Yeah, of course.
So
I haven't seen that, but I know the 3-body problem.
Okay, physics, so they've got these devices from this futuristic technology, and you can put on this headset and it's a video game, but it's indistinguishable from reality. They pick up dirt and they're like, oh my God, and it's like fun, and they like can smell it and they can like feel the dirt in their hands, and when they get stabbed, they feel it. So this like, and I'm sure the adaptation, the show on Netflix is different than the book, but it's very interesting. It was a good show, by the way. But the fact is, at some point, we create technology will enable us, and this is also possibly a no, but at some point, ostensibly, we create a fidelity of reality that is indistinguishable from reality. And so at that point, if you want to go skiing and you want that, like you still need proof of work to like, so you don't become a fat slob, like a la Wall-E and like.
But it's like a Ready Player One thing, you're saying.
Yeah, it's a exactly. It's a Ready Player One thing. And so like, if I want to drive a Lambo, like maybe I can do it in virtual reality. And by the way, maybe I can die a million deaths. Maybe I can, maybe first-person shooters will be so real that you die and you wake up back in this reality and you're like, there's already videos of people like jumping into their TVs with like the current very like low-level VR. So I guess my point is that time being scarce, yes, it's a problem right now because we die when we're 70 or 80. Space being scarce is also a problem because there's only so much coastal land. But if we start to expand and start to think about solutions to these problems, there are theoretic solutions. Yeah. And if reality is indistinguishable, it's kind of like a matrix question. If reality is indistinguishable, I mean, you can imagine the Pandora's box that would open, and there would be like realists who only want real experiences and want real risk. And then there'd be people who want to, free solo a cliff that's like, you can't tell the difference, and every detail is perfect, perfectly. So I think that those are solvable. Are they solvable in the real world? I don't know, but even maybe.
Yeah. Interstellar travel and things like this.
Yeah, but then, how does population keep going up, and can everybody have a coastal property? And like, it's good questions. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I guess I would probably fall in that realist camp, where my hope is that the technology gets more out of the way rather than more immersive. Like, sure, immersive video games or whatever, that's fine, but I don't like the idea of a world where everyone's living inside of a virtual reality, and that's a little unnerving to me.
Me too.
My hope is more that we have kind of a spiritual awakening as a result of all the freedom we have afforded ourselves through these digital tools, right? That we get back to the self-actualization, right? We get all this extra time and leisure time and luxury and tools, frankly, for self-introspection, right? There's all these different psychological frameworks and modalities that we've accumulated up until this point, that we have some awakening, and then we're back to, I don't know, art and dance and good food and love. Love. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. That could be naively optimistic, but it's my hope, at least.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of the I want to drive a Lambo or I want this experience is partly a Fiat construct.
I mean, toys are fun, but it's not going to define your life. So
I would wear a headset. It's kind of like we do drugs, we do DMT, we do ayahuasca, we do ketamine, and like we look for answers for this mystical. And these changes in reality through. So we already do these like mind altering virtual realities or real reality changes. Yeah. And they're mind boggling. So, I think that if given the choice, like personally, I would jump off a cliff and experience that. And call me weird, but I would love to live out my dreams and see where they go, and have, that would be interesting to do every once in a while, almost kind of like a, Burning Man experience or something. Yeah. But I do think that you're right. And I think most people and most Bitcoiners would probably fall on the side of realism and being realists and wanting the real things. Yeah. And I'm there with you. Yeah. I think that right now, the direction it seems to be going is Oculus Quest, video games, and Neuralink, and it seems like we're moving in that direction because people want to escape from reality. Sure,
because fiat reality sucks. By the way, like how much of that is escapism?
Right.
So like if we're in a Bitcoin reality that sucks less, maybe the impulse for escapism dwindles as well.
So that's why I wrote this book and why I call it Self-Bitcoinization, because I think right now we have 1% of people who are self-actualized. I think when we move towards hyper-Bitcoinization and we adopt a Bitcoin mentality, an abundance mentality, and adopt Bitcoin as a society and as individuals, then we can start thinking about like hyper-Bitcoinization is to society as self-Bitcoinization is to us as individuals. And so I lay out a moral framework of how we can use self-Bitcoinization now trapped in this fiat construct to achieve, self-actualization and enlightenment now. Because in the future, I think 50%, 70%, 100% of us will be, maybe not 100%, but 80, 90% of us will be self-actualized, and that will be the goal. Art and love, and like you were saying, and weaving
human flourishing. It's human flourishing,
and being your authentic self. Yes. Because how many of us are our authentic selves right now? That's like a privilege that's built on the hierarchy of needs.
Yes, and we're like, Bitcoiners I think are already going through this process to some extent. Yeah. Like for me, what it's been like is, well, first of all, there's the economic liberation, right? You realize money's a scam. You start saving in Bitcoin. You become more economically liberated as a result. Yeah. But then that higher freedom takes you into deeper aspects of freedom. Yeah. Right. So we've started doing, for me, it was a lot of yoga, breath work, spiritual practices, these things, trying to conquer myself, basically. Like I have all these unconscious patterns from childhood or this or that. Well,
it's an interesting word, conquer, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's too strong of a word, but you're trying, what Carl Jung said is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life and you will call it fate.
Right.
So there's this tyranny of your own psychology. If you have not made these aspects of yourself conscious, right? Like your shadow, make the shadow conscious and then integrate it into your being, then it doesn't matter how economically liberated you are. You're still a slave to your own shadow aspects of your psyche.
And we all have shadows.
Yeah. And so for me, like there has been this extension of the economic liberation into the psychological liberation. And those are the retreats we've been doing in Mexico. It's like you take these guys down there, we're just down there like doing breath work, movement, meditation, talking, but then things start coming up. People start realizing, oh shit, I had this thing in childhood and that's why I act this way. And that's why my wife and I have this problem and blah, blah, all these things. And it's just using these ancient tools. Some of them are ancient. Some of them are a little more modern.
Yeah. It's Ayurvedic.
Ayurvedic, yoga, meditation. But then there's also, the breath work is like from the 60s. Obviously a lot of the psychological tools are from the 20th century. And so there is this continuity of freedom, right? Like it gets beyond the economic into the individual and the psychological. That's very profound. Something that people struggle with, I think, and it is difficult to articulate, is this seemingly tenuous connection between the monetary standard and the moral standard.
Yeah.
Now, it's been written about a lot by libertarian philosophers historically. They've even said, one of the writers, I forget who it is, I think it's Ferdinand Lips in the Gold Wars, could be misattributing, as I always tend to do, so don't shoot me for misattributing.
I do it too.
But the paraphrase is that the monetary standard and the moral standard are inexorably linked.
Yeah.
Right? And so you could take a very extreme example of this, like a hyperinflation. In a hyperinflation, you see the most immoral acts imaginable, right? The money doesn't work. People are stealing from one another, killing each other, eating their pets, burning the money to survive. It's like, it's chaos. It's a mass psychosis. And so that's the extreme example. The gradient between kind of no inflation and hyperinflation is whatever degree you want to choose.
Right.
And it seems to be, if we look around in the post-pandemic world, the inflation has driven mass psychosis in many different ways.
Yeah.
So but this still seems to be a point of confusion for people. Like, how do we make this connection salient and real between morality and the dilution of money? How are these two things connected?
More digestible.
Yes.
So, right. So the answer that I am playing with, because obviously people have different philosophies, but the answer that I'm playing with is probably best viewed at, because we can all understand it, from within this current system. So right now, when you think about, if I ask you, like, what's your value? You'll be like, what do you mean? My net worth? Like we kind of jump to how we measure value in general. So for a society, it's GDP, perhaps, and for an individual, it's net worth. Like how much are you worth? When you say how much are you worth, you're asking about money. Like if I say, Robert, how much are you worth? You could say whatever. You'd be answering in dollars. You would know right away.
It's presumed to be a financial question.
But when I ask you how much you're worth, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why on earth would...
It's qualitative, not quantitative.
Yeah. So the reason money is inextricable from morality is because we tie our worth and our value to money. And since money is corrupt and changeable, and since everybody's cutthroat PvP, so is morality. And so, even the most moral of us, that's why, like, I constantly forgive grifters. And actually, I have a whole different opinion of the whole grifting culture and every meme coin and every altcoin and shitcoin. Not only do I think they're necessary, but like, I think that moral turpitude and our immoral, like, predilections right now. Like we fight these. We fight to be moral right now. Whereas morality should be like easy. It should be the default.
Yeah.
And it is at like Burning Man. When I go to Burning Man, it's a gift economy, and there's like it's amazing. If you haven't been to Burning Man, everybody.
I went for the first time last year, and there is that.
Oh, that's cool.
That gracious gratitude gift economy, but then there's also the dark side. People getting their bikes stolen, and all people breaking into RVs,
which is fiat.
It's the world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people bring fiat into utopia.
Yeah.
Because that's the base layer.
Yeah.
So it's incredible to have something like Burning Man that exists even inside this as like a little bubble, like that you're poking your head into, looking at a potential utopian future.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to have a gift economy like Burning Man, but suffice it to say, our morality is inextricably tied to our money because when we think about worth, we conflate the two completely. Like we think about the value of things. We think about the value of things as measured in money. Yeah. Why? Because money is the value of our time. Why? Sure. Because, well, I have a skill and I need to trade that skill for someone else's skill, and skills have relative value. Like it's based on how complex that skill is and how much sacrifice has needed to go into the accrual of that skill. Yeah. So there's this obvious, so like if you bring it all the way back to first principles, then it all is tied to our value and our worth, and the value and worth of our seconds and our moments in this life. And that filters all the way up to our morality, which is, more of like a vibrational like characteristic of our existence.
Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware's mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few strokes of the keyboard. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your miner's energy bill for the first week of each of your mining rigs when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-sig vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which that have unilateral control over your assets. More than just security, OnRamp simplifies inheritance and estate planning, ensuring your Bitcoin wealth moves seamlessly to your loved ones without the risk and complexities of self-custody. Easily designate beneficiaries right in the OnRamp dashboard, eliminating the need for unreliable treasure maps or other complex key-sharing schemes. You can also avoid the probate process and ensure your heirs receive their Bitcoin securely with legal title transfers designed to keep your wealth intact for generations. As Bitcoin continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly access financial services, from inheritance and insurance to trading, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security. And importantly, the onboarding process is fast and frictionless. I set up my own OnRamp account, and it was far easier than dealing with hardware wallets or traditional self-custody setups. The team walked me through everything step by step, making sure I had a secure, reliant setup for my Bitcoin wealth. Secure your generational wealth with confidence. Schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team today at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Let's talk about a Bitcoin world, or just actually beyond that. Let's just say I have a hypothetical world where it's all pure free market. Every exchange is consensual. There's no coercion whatsoever.
And you've got a perfect meter, whatever
perfect
it's called.
money, perfect morality. Everyone is just like, we just don't steal and we don't kill, right? We just cooperate and we produce and we live, you know?
There's 0.0% of the populations that's mentally disturbed that kill psychopaths.
Yeah, but I mean, just for like a thought experiment. Let's say it's literally 100% of everyone is just productive, non-coercive, all consensual, you know, all that's maxed out basically.
Yep. Got it.
In that world, your financial net worth would actually be the best proxy probably for your service worth to other people, right? That would be an indication that you had solved the most problems for the most people better, faster, cheaper, right? Because you can only earn money through consensual exchange in that world. In the world we're in currently.
Social worth, okay.
Yeah, well, like again, worth is a very tricky word because it's like, my worth to my wife is way higher than it is to anyone individually. And not only because of financial, but also because she loves me and because I'm the father of our children to be. And like, there's all these other dimensions, right? The same in reverse, right? Like your partner or wife is going to be worth way more to you than she is to me or to anyone else. So worth it's a difficult one. It's tricky. And then, but for us, like, and this has been difficult for me to assimilate, I really think we are wired to be cooperative, which again, if we are a collective organism, that makes sense, right? We're all neurons in the brain.
Right.
We want to be of service to one another. Right. So I would define my own self-worth in terms of how helpful I am to my loved ones, right?
Right.
And beyond that, to my community, right? When I'm doing this show and someone's like, hey, I saw this episode, or hey, I read this thing that you wrote and it really changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my business or my family's financial future.
Isn't
like I get chills. I feel amazing. Like I love to do that.
100%.
Right. It's that, again, that creating value beyond yourself is what gives me my own sense of self-worth.
Right.
So the challenge is like, my friends put this, I think he got this from his therapist, is like, there's a challenge in trying to separate your accomplishments from your identity almost. Where it's like, if I'm not of value to other people, I'm going to really suffer and struggle in terms of my own self-evaluation. Maybe that's a man thing. I'm not really entirely sure.
No, that sounds natural. I'm processing it. I mean, I agree with you. Like, I'm sure that some of my self-worth, and now we're getting kind of deep into internalizing and introspection. But I think that we all have a certain understanding of our self-worth that is tied to our social value.
Right.
And our own perception of our like morality. Like, can we look in the mirror? And we've all done things that, even if we don't regret, we're like, okay, yeah, I'm morally flexible, and I admit that was a situation where I was morally flexible. And like, I think that the healthiest people psychologically are like, I accept that. I accept myself. I love myself.
100%.
That's okay.
The darkest people are those people that do not acknowledge their own inner darkness.
Because we all have it.
It's that tonas. Yes. Well, you can't. How can you be of substance if you don't cast a shadow? Right. And the closer you are to the light, sometimes the bigger the shadow you cast.
And that's why we need to be less hard on grifters. I mean, we need to educate them and show them why there's a better.
Call them out. Yeah.
Call them out and say, look, you're stealing from others.
Yeah.
This is bad. Here's why.
Yeah.
But I understand that this is a natural part of the evolution. And so I have a more open view of that, but you know, and that's a different conversation. But instead of going there, like, to focus on what's really important in this conversation, which is money and morality. You know, I've been saying that Bitcoin is a Trojan horse for morality, because once you value people's time, essentially using mathematics and truth, and you have, for the first time ever, a static measuring tool for value, it evens out the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, everybody's on the exact
same language.
Then it's fair for the first time in history.
Yeah.
It's not gamesmanship. It's not, I'm going to put myself into a position of power where I can get more value units, more dollars, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden it's fair. And then all of a sudden it's like anybody can work, be rewarded for that work, and their value will appreciate because of their contribution to humanity.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that the current system, like it's funny because the current system is an animal system. The fiat mentality, the scarcity mentality is based out of primal animal scarcity. The next tribe is going to kill me.
It's fear.
It's fear. It's scarcity of time, space. It's scarcity of everything. But our minds have gotten to a place, and we've evolved to a place where, I agree with you. Our fundamental, like as a human organism, we're all a big family. At some level, there's like, we're all in it together on this pale blue dot. And so I do think that the fundamental default is collaboration and all the stuff that the mind, produces. We should live in abundance. There's already a lot of abundance. Yeah. It's just hyper-focused at the very top right now. And that's because of the mentality. And
because of the broken money.
Because of the broken money and because of the broken morality.
Yeah.
And that affects everything. It affects medicine horribly. Yeah. It affects everything. And it ruins people's lives, and it kills. I mean, it's like genocidal.
Yes.
When you think about it as an ideology. It's
genocide is funded by printed money.
Yeah. Yeah. Like all throughout history.
Yes.
And so, and it gets a little spicy. Like I get a little spicy in my book because I have a chapter on, fear versus hope and scarcity versus abundance. And then of course, self-Bitcoinization. But then I also have chapters, I have one on love, which is not that, it's kind of more ephemeral. But I have one on religion and one on politics. And then my final chapter is the death of money. But, and it gets, and I try and stay very neutral and even-handed because I don't know shit, like.
You're very Socratic.
Yeah, I want to ask the questions. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. If you have to proclaim a deity, maybe that's he, Socrates.
Yeah.
The only thing you know is you know nothing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And right. Like, oh man, that's a whole, it's fascinating. I think, but I love your question about money and morality being inextricable because, I really think that like we should question our fundamental assumptions about this paradigm and about the way we approach our lives. And like I think that the right questions are like, why do I determine my net worth based on the things I have and money? And we just answered that. But why is how does morality figure into that? And why is it that I get more things in this paradigm if I'm willing to be less moral?
Yeah.
And so if you have perfect money, then you really create the framework, that foundation for perfect morality.
Right.
And by the way, I don't believe in relativistic morality. I don't know again, but I'm more with Hume and and Nietzsche and those guys, I think, and which is also very important because I think that, I'm a Bitcoin maxi, but I'm like a benevolent maxi. And I understand toxicity and I don't judge it at all. I think that it's also comes from a very loving, beautiful place. But I do think that, and I've had some recent conversations and some disagreement with like Tomer about moral high ground. And I don't think that, personally, I think that, there may not be, again, I don't know, but like an absolute, like a moral absolute, because there are a lot of situations where you could say, well, what if, and so like, it's hard to think about an objective morality. So I hate to think, and while I think there's a consensus morality that is just as important as like a more objective morality, I think it's hard for anyone to have a moral high ground, even if we think we do.
Yeah.
And even if in effect in the world, it's important that we do, because I do think it's important to have a moral high ground for certain things.
Sure.
But I'm not an absolutist in that regard. And so that falls back to morality.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly a social construct or a preference, right? There's a code, there's moral codes that we are adhering to, and there's different types of moral codes. So you would say, okay, well, clearly it's subjective, right? It's just moral relativism all the way down. However, I think when you, by extension, consider the consequences of adherence to certain moral codes versus other moral codes, you can get into the objective very quickly, right? If there's a society that morally condemns cannibalism and stealing and killing, it's going to have a lot more economic output and prosperity than one that celebrates cannibalism and stealing and killing, right? If part of your moral code is, oh, we eat each other and we kill each other and we steal from each other, well, you're going to be, that society will be impoverished until the end of time, right? They're probably going to just destroy themselves ultimately. But if you have one that's opposite to that, objectively, it will create so much innovation and wealth and prosperity. So it's like you can argue, like, oh, wait, is it relative? Is it subjective? Sure. You just
choose the outcome that matters.
Choose whatever code you want, but it's like
there's an optimization.
I'm reminded of
there's
Ayn
a moral
Rand.
Optimization.
Ayn Rand said, "You are free to ignore reality.
Right.
You are not free to ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Right. There are objective consequences to subjective decisions.
Right.
Pure and simple. So like, that's why I'm always beating the drum of life, liberty, property. Like I feel like for me, that is the moral, ethical, legal code that we have discovered collectively that is the most useful at getting us closest to human flourishing.
Right. Right.
And that's also what I think Bitcoin embodies, right? It's like, it's because it's hard to steal, then it makes killing less profitable. Obviously, it gives you a lot of freedom in terms of being able to put your private keys between your ears and go anywhere in the world. And then therefore it's the ultimate form of private property. So like it is life, liberty, property enshrined in this code.
You know, I agree with that. And I think that I have a lot of fun steel manning counter arguments just as an intellectual exercise. Sure. And so I think that this one isn't really super productive or useful. It's kind of like, is there a God or not? It's like
Pascal says you might as well just believe there is.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a Pascal's wager for Bitcoin too, right?
Exactly.
That
interestingly similar.
Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you, like just pragmatically to speak your finance language because you want more value units, why wouldn't you take the #1 Cager, Sharpe ratio, nascent novel asset class? Like how many times in human history has there been a new asset class?
And unlimited upside and limited downside. It's an asymmetric position. Why would you not
why wouldn't you put 2 to 5% or 10%? Like why wouldn't you do that? Like if you're logical, I'm sorry, like it would be dumb.
Right. You can't be logical and do it.
So I think like, with regards to Pascal's wager, and you can apply that to morality also. And I think that's kind of the point, and it's a very good, solid, strong argument. So like the rest of the intellectual sparring that happens like on a very kind of out there philosophical, like PhD level, it can be really fun to kind of like come up with arguments, but you're absolutely right. Like, why spend a lot of time there when we clearly don't want to be cannibals? And we clearly aren't looking for a way to justify Nazi Germany, or something like that. Like we're already all on board, except for maybe like the 0.0001%, or whatever it is that like are actually evil. Because maybe evil does exist, and maybe some people are. I don't know. That's another question too, because society, maybe it's that tonos, and we need some level of.
Like evil. I mean, one way to frame its utility is like the quality assurance testing of the good, right? Like you build something that's good, a structure that's meant to withstand the ravages of time and whatnot. Well, you need to also test it against if a human tries to take that thing down, right? If it's whatever it may be, right? The constitutional republic that is the
Yeah.
United States, it needs to be robust against evil acts.
Challenges. That takes us full circle to the organism.
Yeah, and you can't verify its robustness against evil unless there is actual evil attempted to be perpetrated against it, right? You're trying to sabotage it and break it. Just like in software development, you build this code and then you hire a bunch of developers to try and go and break it.
Yeah, it's a white hat.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So there is, in some strange way, this utility to evil. It doesn't mean go be evil, right? And it's like we should try and minimize it, obviously, or have it as like an unused option, ideally, right? And that's kind of what Bitcoin's doing. It's like, well, stealing is always possible, but we're just making it way harder. We're making it way more robust to stealing.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's less of a motivation to kill because you can't kill someone and steal their purchasing power.
The way I look at it is, and I agree with all that, and so this is only additive to that, is that it takes a very, very, very small amount of evil.
That's right.
To counteract a large amount.
Destruction is easy. Creation is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Moving from 0 to 1, hard.
Yes.
Very hard. So like, it takes a very small amount of fentanyl to kill somebody.
Exactly.
And so when you think about the need for that plug and pull, I think that we're in pretty good equilibrium when we're like 99.9999% and then this 0.0001% of very powerful evil, because one act of evil affects so many people.
Sure.
Like in the ER, I see somebody die and then their families are complaining, and then they go and do additional additional harm to other families. It has these ripple effects.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a really interesting, that's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And then, it's interesting in Bitcoin too, how like people don't always realize what they're doing. Like I'm still condemned for this BitClout situation from years ago. And the whole story was I was at Jimmy Song's house with a bunch of Bitcoiners, and I won't name names, but they're like, there's this thing. They've already created this token. It's in, they've made profiles for everyone. Yeah. And you can go and sell the thing and have Bitcoin. I was like, oh, okay. That sounds interesting. And I wrote it down. I was like, let me think about that later. And then tweeted about it a couple of months later. And then internet goes crazy. Like, oh, you burn in hell. You will die. We will come and kill you. Literally, I was saying like, what do you guys think about this BitClout thing? Yeah. And they went crazy on me. And then my disagreeableness kicks in. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, well, fuck you. I'm definitely doing it now. Like you're telling me I can't do it. I'm definitely doing it.
Yeah. It's like Fred Krueger right now.
But so it's happened. It's a tale as old as time. Yeah. And so there is this immune system response, but it's definitely, there's an autoimmune component where you can have like an autoimmune condition.
Say it's arthritis or
because at some point, I actually didn't know even what an affinity scam was, that this thing was a scam. Like people already owned the token.
Right.
Even though I'm not selling anything, I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just going to sell the thing that other people already own. And so in going through that process, I learned what an affinity scam is. And in retrospect, I was just trusting. I just trusted the people that I was around. I was like, oh, these are Bitcoiners. We're at a Bitcoiner's house. We're eating brisket. Like it's a harmless thing, right? And so, but then you do it and then, oh, it's an affinity scam. And then, so you're in the situation. I'm like, okay, well, I did it. And at the very end of the line, I'm like, okay, I feel fine about everything that I did other than owning these proceeds. I actually don't want to own these proceeds because they were from this affinity scam. So what am I going to do with these proceeds? I donate them to Bitcoin open source development.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so for me, I feel completely good about it. I feel like my consciousness is completely clear. Yeah. And yet people still 4 or 5 years later, constantly like there is this psychotic, basement dwelling Bitcoin maximalists. They joke and call them eating pizza and popping pencils or popping pimples. They're these guys that just live to try and constantly attack you.
Yeah, and I mean, we all have skeletons, and we all have done all kinds of things, and like we all live in this kind of fiat standard. And again, like I forget who maybe. it Brett or Eric Weinstein? Talks about moral, like a moral bank account. And like we've got like you can be totally morally bankrupt where everything you do is net negative and working against morality. But if you say one thing or two things, it's like, okay, well, that guy is working towards the good. He's you know, or she's contributing to human understanding. Like she's a good person. Like, yeah, she did that thing, but we're all human. And like, you know, and you know, they say to forgive is divine. And like, why would we not, if as moral people and as Bitcoiners, why would we not, you know, change is constant. And why would we not adapt to be ever learning, ever trying to self-actualize, self-Bitcoinize? And why wouldn't we just be trying to become better versions of ourselves? And that implies that we were worse versions of ourselves before. And, you know, nobody's perfect and and nobody will fit every other person's idea of perfect.
And there's a key point there too, is that there is an idea that people have about you that is always deviates from the truth of who you are. Right? Even the people that know you most closely, right? People that are intimate with you day in, day out. You don't even fully understand yourself. How could even someone close to you understand yourself, much less someone that follows you online? They think they have you figured out. So there, it gets into this biblical wisdom of like, we are all sinners, right? We all miss the mark. We are aiming creatures. We aim for goals, but we all fuck up. And therefore, if each individual always deviates from their chosen path of purpose, if you don't have forgiveness for yourself and for others, well, then you're going to be stuck in this loop of psychosis in a way, right? Because you're not coming to terms with reality. Like that's how everyone works. If you're just going to sit there and dwell on something you've done or something someone else has done forever, then you are going to be trapped in this unconscious pattern that prevents you from moving forward towards anything.
And it prevents the whole system from moving forward. And the whole idea. I mean, it's counter-serving to Bitcoin adoption to ostracize people and make them feel like you're toxic. You know, like I do feel we should get away from that. At the same time, I understand it and like
you should call out the bullshit and it's fine. But at some point, I don't know, you also have to look at yourself. And be like, what bullshit are you doing? Because you are human, right? Well, then if you're a human, then where are you going wrong in your own life? You're so busy calling out this person or these people. Have you looked at yourself?
Exactly. And what do you look like in the mirror?
Let he who was without sin cast the first stone, as Christ said.
Exactly. And I mean, so, you know, and for me, my story is interesting. You know, I started out and I've done tons of shitcoining, you know, and I am like a Bitcoin maximalist. I believe in Bitcoin, all roads lead to Bitcoin. I've also always gambled in Vegas. I get that it's a fiat game, but I even still to this day, I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I've got a bag of shitcoins, you know, and like it's a small bag of shitcoins on the side. It's my dirty little secret, you know, and like if people want to gamble and they want to play, you know, what do I want to do? I want to increase my Bitcoin stack. And it's so fiat, you know, it's my little fiat pleasure because I can talk, you know, I can philosophically speak about all this stuff and where we want to be in morality and all this stuff, but I'm the same as you or anybody else, you know? And so, you know, I've also been an entrepreneur. Capitalism and the fiat, the fact that our money is debasing really is a good motivator for us to get more money in this world, whether it's by virtuous means or otherwise. And, you know, I've always, as a physician and upstanding member of a society who, you know, doesn't want to go to jail, you know, like I'll push it on taxes and like I'll try and keep as much money as I can legally keep and with a 70,000 page tax code and use that to my advantage. But other than that, I don't do anything illegal or anything. But as an entrepreneur, you know, like a couple of years ago, I came on as an advisor to a very early stage Web3 app, you know, and I talk about Bitcoin. I want to add Bitcoin. Well, I slowly, it's a very small startup. And now I'm the CEO of that startup. And I don't really talk about it that much. I'm trying to do stuff with it and we've got funding and it's very exciting. And what I want to do though, is I want to incorporate Bitcoin as a central component of it. It's a decentralized trading app basically that's about to launch. And like, I want all these tokens that are going to zero against Bitcoin to in a safer environment where it's not centralized, to have education and store whatever they're making in Bitcoin. And so like so my idea is to, and I came onto this company as an advisor, and I've slowly pushed it towards, you know, a Bitcoin thing. And then my strategy is to ultimately make it like Bitcoin. But you know, like I've been called out on it because people don't see the vision and don't have the understanding that I have, like the idea that we need to educate, especially like people who are already in Solana and all these other things, like they believe super strong. They don't think they're doing anything bad.
Of course.
And so like, you know, helping to educate and being friendly as Bitcoin maximalists, or like thinking that Bitcoin is, you know, or rather understanding, like if we can bring more people over, that's why like, you know, people who go to Nostr and like I want them also to keep educating some of our biggest and best voices. You know, I think that one of the most virtuous things that they can do for society is to expedite the adoption of Bitcoin. And that means interfacing with the dirty side of fiat and helping to pull people over actively. Which it's interesting. And there's a million ways to do it. And, you know, I think we have to be careful about throwing stones in a glass house or throwing that first stone.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of, almost like a certainness, right? There's a lack of humility. It's kind of ironic when they're saying stay humble, stack sats, but there's this lack of humility that
are we humble?
You are evil, you're a scammer, burn you down, go to hell. And it's just like, well, okay, thank you. Thank you for that opinion of me. Have you looked at yourself? Yeah. Are you looking at yourself? And the funny thing is too, that it's this dynamic, in my experience, only exist online. I have had zero bad interactions in person. I have interacted with probably tens of thousands of Bitcoiners in person, and I've had exactly zero negative interactions. Now,
like, that might be a real person.
That might be because I'm 6'4", 230 pounds. Like that might have something to do with it. But it's a weird thing. This technology can be a little bit dehumanizing, I guess, because you're just behind a keyboard or behind a phone, and you forget that there's a real person on the other side of it. It's not just Bitcoin either. It's, you know, Twitter's notorious for having these negative interactions. But
well, I'm giving you my true self. It's not just because I'm worried that you could eat me. You know,
cannibalism's not part of my moral code. Don't worry. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Knowing when to buy Bitcoin can feel complicated, and knowing how much to buy can be overwhelming, and getting started can be a headache, but it doesn't have to be. That's exactly why I recommend Coinbits, because it solves these major blockers and it's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. With Coinbits' Round Ups feature, you can automatically convert your spare change into Bitcoin while you shop. For example, when you buy a coffee for $3.50, the extra 50 cents is rounded up and it goes straight into Bitcoin. Here's why that's a huge win for you, because you don't have to be a tech wizard or try to time the market just right with Bitcoin. With Coinbits Roundups, you simply set it, shop, and stack sats. And you can set this up in under 2 minutes. Just visit the website, connect your card, and boom, you're buying a little Bitcoin every time you spend money. So stop wasting your time with complicated exchanges or confusing shitcoin apps. Coinbits simplifies your Bitcoin savings strategy. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove. Again, that's coinbits.app/breedlove. We've talked a lot about these competing paradigms, right? Fiat, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Fiat being much more zero-sum game, right? My win is your loss, coercive, dishonest, right? And again, it's all sort of embedded in the monetary system and the incentives, but it also manifests in the characters of the people adhering to that paradigm.
It's amazing.
And it contrasts, in contradistinction to that is the Bitcoin paradigm, right? It's very honest, radical truth, radical transparency, proof of work, right? Anything of value takes work to create. The people, obviously it's a new paradigm, it's emergent, but the people that do adhere to it seem to be coalescing around traditional value systems, right? You mentioned, people getting healthy, losing weight, starting families, finding God, et cetera, et cetera. Like good things, basically.
Good things.
Good things. So there's these two paradigms, and there's people migrating from one to the other. It does seem to be a one-way bridge mostly. I don't know many Bitcoiners going back to a fiat paradigm.
Yeah, right. I think it's a one-way bridge.
So let's talk about that bridge. Like what is it? How can people find it? What is the right way to walk across it?
I love this. Yeah, right. Yeah. So the analogy of Bitcoin as a bridge might be a little bit different than a lot of people's understanding of Bitcoin as like the destination.
Yeah, it's kind of both, right? There's this Bitcoin paradigm, but there's also this studying Bitcoin as like the bridge out of fiat paradigm into Bitcoin.
You got to do
paradigm.
the work.
Yes, exactly.
Right. It's all about work. Nothing, nothing's for free.
Yeah, exactly.
But so I think that the way I look at it is that the process of becoming self-actualized is through Bitcoin is self-Bitcoinization for me, and that's what I wrote about. But the process of society becoming Bitcoinized is hyper-Bitcoinization, and these are, like you said, paths and also end goals. For society or for an individual to change into something that's basically more moral to begin with, and something that is, ready to be as a market participant in a more fair environment for all market participants, because you have a fundamental building block that's based on truth and mathematics.
Sure.
So I think that making the first step is always the hardest, right? Like when you think about like how are you going to climb this mountain? How are you going to climb Everest?
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you've got to overcome the static friction before you build up the momentum. Right. Yeah.
And then it's easier, right?
Yes.
Then it's like, and with Bitcoin, it's a downhill sort of thing. It's easier and it gains momentum as you're like, oh my gosh, the difficulty adjustment. That's incredible. Like everything contributes to a more perfect understanding of not something that's a fantasy, but that's something that's being adopted and that's happening. And you're kind of like first to this new thing. Like right now, we're all early adopters of, again, a structure that's being adopted faster than the internet and has reached critical mass. So, I think that taking that first step is the most fascinating part because it's like deciding to lose weight or jumping into cold water. And most of us, especially coming from a fiat-minded place, if we've benefited from the fiat system and we're smart and manipulative and, morally flexible and it could be anything, all of that is virtuous practically inside of a fiat standard. So you could be a poker player or you could be a politician. You could be a lawyer. You could be a doctor. You could be a gangster. I mean, we idolize certain gangsters. Look at the movies and the Al Capones and the these are somewhat our heroes because they fought the system and they were illegal and they killed people. Yeah, but it was virtuous somehow because yeah, they're evil, but they made money, you know? And so like they made money and they followed their own path to that. And so I think that it's hard for people in the fiat system who gain by fiat, and it's hardest for the people who are most successful, the Warren Buffetts, the Charlie Mungers, the politicians, the CEOs in general, to benefit from change. Like things are perfect. I've got $800 million. I'm happy as can. I don't need, what I don't want is something threatening my perfect little utopia where I've got a Bugatti and I've got everything I need. I've got 8 houses and so I think that making that first step onto the bridge, first even seeing the bridge, it's kind of like They Live, where the guy where he gets the glasses. I think it's, who was it, like Rowdy Piper or something?
I haven't seen that.
Oh, it was a great movie, but he gets these glasses that he can see the aliens living amongst us, and they all have like skeletonized faces, like with muscles and stuff. And I mean, it's really it's a great movie actually, but and there's like this resistance. It's a great allegory for actually what's happening now in the kind of politosphere. But suffice it to say, I think that even seeing the bridge or understanding that it's a bridge, and then the next step is realizing where it goes and the destination, because most people approach Bitcoin with, I want to make money. It keeps going up in value. I need to reassess. Like maybe I should buy it. It keeps going up. I'm going to make money. And then they kind of get sucked down the rabbit hole. So they don't even know they're on the bridge yet because they're on the fiat side and they're like, well, I'm going to put 5% or I'm going to put 1% in. I'm going to buy some Bitcoin. So even buying some Bitcoin isn't enough to necessarily see the bridge, let alone the destination. So, and describing Bitcoin to people who are no coiners and normies, and frequently who have benefited from the status quo and want to keep the status quo, is like describing color to someone who is blind. Yeah. Like you could say, well, there's color and there's black and white, but they can't even see. So they just get annoyed and frustrated with like, like.
Sounds like crazy talk.
Yeah, GFY, like life is good. Why are you guys even like playing in this like side quest, this stupid internet money? Like it makes sense. Like I get it. Like, so I think that people who, it's easiest for us to focus on the independents, right? The people who are like, that's interesting. I'm open-minded, and we can pull more and more of those people. And then as we get adoption, the laggards are going to be like, fine, I'm going to buy money. Like I have to, because it's what energy is transacted in. And now it's been adopted and banks, and it's crazy where we're at right now. Banks are about to custody Bitcoin. It's unbelievable. But suffice it to say, the first step for most people in even seeing that it's a path, a bridge between paradigms, is generally to be tricked into it. And usually they're tricked into it because it's a get-rich-quick scheme and because they can make money. And that's how I have to approach physicians, because if I get into all this like philosophy,
sounds cultish.
Oh, their eyes glaze over. They're like, you're crazy. Like actually a crazy person. Like I'm amazed you're a physician. And for Bitcoiners, it's like, wow, yeah, that's interesting. Like, let's talk about this and like where, but for physicians, it's very hard because physicians have a lot of money frequently. It's an important skill. If you can make someone walk again or see again, society values that. And even though we're paid less and less every year, we still are upper middle class or upper class, generally top 1%. Physicians work hard and get paid. So, my main orange pilling is with physicians. I do podcasts for physicians. I'm not huge in the Bitcoin world. I'm like kind of straddling. I work more with physicians because that's my world. I'm now getting more into the Bitcoin side because there's so many fascinating people and there's so much evolution and learning that I can do from people like yourself, whose podcasts I've listened to for years, and Sailor and like Jeff and all these guys, and gals. It's really incredible. So I'm getting sucked in to that as well, as I walk across the bridge because we're all somewhere, right? Nobody's like actually in hyper Bitcoinization yet.
Yeah, it's not here yet.
I mean, Jeff Booth is getting close. But so I think that discovering, having an open mind and getting over yourself, getting over that ego is the hardest step.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to jump into the lake or take the first step up the mountain. Most people are comfortable where they're at.
Yeah.
Now, people in Nigeria and there are people who are being forced into Bitcoin.
Yeah. And
it's being adopted globally for that reason. In very relatively small amounts for, there's people converting $4 into Bitcoin, literally. And they need it because they're hyperinflating and because they're trying to get out from the pressure of the dollar. So I think that, kind of to sum it up, most people don't know the bridge exists. Most people can't see the future. They have to be tricked to stick their toe in the water. And the only reason that happens is because they think they're going to make more money on a gamble on magic internet money. And, you see people constantly saying, well, I bought the Bitcoin Standard, Safe's book, for 10 of my friends. Guess how many people read it? It's like 0, or 1, and people put it down. And so a lot of people aren't ready for it. And that's part of the reason why I think a lot of the adoption of Bitcoin is for better or for worse. And is going to come from these more organized structures that have more to lose and have to evaluate it as an actual existential tool for safety. So nation states. And I think whereas initially it was retail and it was plebs and it was us, and I think there's a lot of frustration. We had our chance to front run companies and nation states and states. There's 12 states with Bitcoin legislation. I think at some point people are going to be like, oh, damn, it's actually happening. This is real. I've been ignoring it too long. I need to jump in. And I think there's going to be a mad rush in the middle here. Yeah. Whether it's now or next cycle, whatever it is, it doesn't really even matter. Hopefully there's even another, as much as I want it to happen immediately just to build up humanity, it's almost like you want people to have more of a chance to get in before these structures that are already so powerful in the current system capitalize on adopting a Bitcoin standard. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers it, but I think the bridge is hard to see or impossible to see. I think that Bitcoin, it's a process, it's a journey as well as a destination. And so in my work here, I'm starting to define new terms because I think we still need new terms to describe the changes that are going to happen. For example, I'm introducing a term that may or may not stick, but it's just an idea called energism. And so energism is more of a decentralized capitalism based on energy and math and truth. And it's like the ultimate free market capitalism, but with different incentives and incentives that are more aligned and maybe more moral, as our previous discussion alluded to. So I think that people buying Bitcoin is voting for, whether they know it's their first step onto the bridge. Yeah. And then it's the hardest step. But then once they buy it and once it starts to go up in value, it's or maybe it goes down in value and they hodl it and they're like, okay, well, I know that it's volatile, and then it goes up in value. And since we're all stuck in the fiat mindset, maybe that's at some point it clicks. Yeah. And they're ready. And all of a sudden they see the bridge and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to get more and more. And there's a process. And maybe I'll read the Bitcoin standard, maybe I'll read the price of tomorrow. Maybe I'll read, whatever. And, this is really interesting. I never thought about money. They used to use salt as money. And then they get the history. I'll read the fourth turning. Oh my God. And they go down the rabbit hole. And then it's I need to convert everything to Bitcoin now.
Yeah.
Which is the natural conclusion.
Yeah, it's funny. There's this, I don't think I had any appreciation for this prior to Bitcoin, but the fact that our beliefs ossify into our ego, right? Like the belief structures we think we have become who we are. Like it becomes our identity, right? You identify as what it could be a political identification, liberal, conservative, vegan, golfer, CrossFitter, Bitcoiner, like all these different clubs that we sign up for or ideologies that we subscribe to. We compile them into our identity.
Yeah, our identity, exactly.
Yeah, and so there's an interesting thing with money in that it is state affiliated in the fiat paradigm, right? There's the US dollar.
Right.
And so like I started to recognize this when I was talking to my Aunt Carolyn about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And she was like, you know, she's very financially successful. She's like, honey, you better be very careful messing with anything that threatens the US dollar. Like that, this is America and that's our currency. And like she was very overtly patriotic about it.
The defense mechanism.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it was like, oh, wow. It's almost like the more successful you've been in that paradigm. I also see this with like Wall Street guys.
Oh yeah.
You know, like these guys literally call themselves the kings of money or the masters of money.
Yeah.
And they know the least about how money works, right? Because it goes back to that old saying that nothing's more difficult for a man to understand than something that his paycheck depends on him not understanding. It's like when you've been rewarded in that paradigm, you're going to be blind to whatever's wrong with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's consciously, unconsciously, maybe a little bit of both. And then so it is that sort of fiat mentality that gets your first foot on the bridge, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm just trying to make money and get rich, like I've been doing my whole fiat life.
Yeah.
And then you don't know that you've put your foot on this entirely new paradigmatic structure that's going to re-architect your ego, ultimately, or your identity over time.
Your morality, your
identity, the way you see the world. Like this is why we invoke that metaphor of the orange pill.
Yeah.
Right. It's like Neo wakes up and he sees the truth for what it is. And it's all the taxpayers are batteries and they're getting, siphoned off by the state. And like, it's such a brutal realization, but well, wouldn't you rather know the truth than live in an illusion? I mean, maybe not, right? There's the other guy that's like, I love the steak. Tastes as good as any other steak. But I think most people,
that's the fiat.
John Vervaeke's talked about this. He said something like, he's polling his audience, his classroom. He's a professor. And he says, how many of you would want to be in a loving, committed, nurturing, romantically intense relationship?
Yeah.
Basically everyone raises their hand.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what everyone wants. Are you kidding me? He goes, okay, great. Now, if you could have that, but your relationship was based on a lie, like they were also seeing someone else, but you didn't know about it, how would you still want it? And like everyone puts their hand down.
Yeah.
So it's like even the thing we want most, like this loving, committed, romantically intense relationship, we want it to be based on truth.
We want it to be real.
We want it to be real, right? Most people don't want to eat that matrix steak, even if it tastes like real fucking steak and we don't know any difference. We don't want it. We have like a compass that's oriented towards truth.
Right.
And so something about putting that first foot on the bridge, it's like maybe like kind of like taking a psychedelic or something. Like you don't really know what's in store for you.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your whole worldview is shattered and you're like, you see this brand new reality. And with that worldview shattering revelation comes a shattering of your own identity, right? Like the world that you thought you fit into has now been deconstructed.
Right.
So you have necessarily been deconstructed along with it. And now you, whatever is left, is there to pick up the pieces.
Right. So it's
and
very
walk
threatening
across
to
that
the
bridge.
ego.
Yeah. So that's what it is. It's like this, there's this weird, and this is, they call it Bitcoin derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Where people just like hate it. Like, no, it's not like they don't like Bitcoin. It's like
it threatens their ego.
They hate it. It's going to zero. They're red in the face screaming about it. It's because it's a belief structure that's threatening to their identity.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I don't think people, you either consciously put your foot on that bridge in pursuit of becoming more rich, basically, or you're running from pain. Right? It's like the people that are living in hyperinflation or some other government oppression, trying to escape, they will willingly go onto that bridge too. And so there's something, it's like there's the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
But somehow either way, right? Whether you're just following your own, I guess you could sum them together as like self-preservation.
Yeah.
It's like just following that Darwinian impulse of self-preservation eventually puts you on that bridge one way or another.
Yeah.
And then once you're on the bridge, the whole re-architecting of your personality and identity starts taking place. And that's where Bitcoin is truly, the rabbit hole is bottomless.
Well, and the sad thing is the people who aren't even at the base level of hierarchy needs, they don't even know Bitcoin exists.
Sure.
It's not even on their radar. They don't even,
They're just trying to eat
their own house. Yeah. So like, and then the system itself as an ingenious, evolved immune mechanism, has created blindness. I mean, it like uses blindness as a defense mechanism.
It needs ignorance to perpetuate itself.
Yes. Like all those masters of money who know the least about money and do the least philosophizing about it and the least thinking about it. It's like, I just need to make as much money as I can. I don't care how it works.
Right.
I get, I'm getting a $3 million paycheck, every month. I've got, I've got the algos all adjusted and like I'm working in this big shop, which by the way, AI is going to replace all of these things. And, so it's going to be funny because they're all going to be out on their ears except for the biggest fish. Yeah. And eventually, but so I think that's very interesting that like what you're saying, and I agree 100%, that, Aunt Caroline, she's, going to be blind. And not only that, like I just talked to my buddy, Jason, who hopefully will listen to this and I try not to talk about Bitcoin too much because I know that he doesn't want to hear it. And, and it's like, and he's a super smart guy. He's been my best friend forever. One of my best friends. And, and so we got into it over a couple of drinks last night. And he's like, the Bitcoin guys, they're always telling you like, like they're always in your face. He's like, shut up about Bitcoin. I don't care about Bitcoin. And, and he's worked very hard as a physician and he's done quite well. And so like, he's got no reason to step his foot on the bridge. He doesn't think about this might help all of humanity if we adopt the Bitcoin standard. And this is actually would be good if we all move towards this. Like that's not even on the radar. Like when you're, again, if he gives his time, he volunteers he's like a beautiful, noble person. And he's just a really incredible person, like always giving his time, mentoring kids and doing stuff with his time and giving of his time. And I'm like, dude, you're a Bitcoiner. You are already a Bitcoiner. You've just made it. So like, but when he thinks about the problems in society, he like solutions, and he doesn't like pretend to have solutions or anything, but any solutions he has or other people who are in that situation, it's pushing the car from the inside.
Sure.
And probably we're incentivized not to care.
Yeah. Probably proposing political solutions, right? A lot of people think they can vote harder or whatever it may be. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because a quick study of history will tell you that doesn't work basically, right? Like political solutions don't, they can move the needle marginally, but there's never fundamental change from a political solution ever. Yeah. I always like to say technology solves problems, politics creates problems.
Right. I'm here from the government. I'm here to fix your problem.
Exactly. And then the other thing, again, about that bridge is like, it seems like the center of the herd, again, right? The core, there's people at the fringes, the disagreeable and the open-minded, these where the Bitcoiner recruits largely come from.
Yeah, the 3 Sigma people.
Yeah, but the people at the core, they really don't change until the pain of not changing exceeds the pain of changing. Yeah. So they need to go through something, right? And this is why I think people outside of the US in emerging countries especially are much more apt to understand Bitcoin quickly. Yeah. Because they're living in conditions of pain where Bitcoin's a very useful solution. Whereas in the West, we haven't had a hyperinflation in the US.
No. Right? And the corruption is so hidden here.
Yes.
People just don't even see it, don't acknowledge it.
Right.
And the propaganda and the games, the mind games. You don't know what to believe.
But the pain is becoming more acute since the pandemic. Like I even was talking yesterday to one of my really good friends. He's a big money real estate developer. Yeah. And he's like, I get it. He's like, you told me to go and listen to these people. And like, I've been listening for a few years. And he's like, I'm on the Bitcoin, or I'm headed towards the Bitcoin standard. he has all these complications about like how do you divest the real estate portfolio in a tax efficient way and blah 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 blah. Right. But he's on that path, and he's on that path because inflation. He's like, this is fucking crazy. Everything's tripled in price. He's like, before, you know, I started listening to these people you had me listen to, he's like, I thought that was just, you know, something in the economy, right? Supply chains or whatever.
It'll get better.
He's like, now I get it. It's they're counterfeiting the money and it's fucking up all the price structures. And I have got to get out of this. This is the escape hatch. And so people are waking up because the pain is becoming more diffuse.
Yeah. And because the pain is becoming more diffuse, everybody's experiencing it, including the politicians, including the CEOs. Everything is existential. Saylor's business was slowly going out of business. That's why he did, you know? So like, it's fascinating to see that the people who are getting it, like when it clicks with a billionaire, they come in with size. You know, and when it clicks with a pleb, you know, when it's starting to click more and more because things are becoming less and less stable.
Exactly.
And that in and of itself is pushing people out the moral risk curve. So like there's a risk curve for investing and, you know, but there's also a morality risk curve. How far are you willing to go? You know, before the consensus morality that creates laws grabs you and puts you in jail because you're caught and you can't, and to your point, and Ayn Rand, you can't, you know, fake your way past the consequences.
Can't ignore the consequences.
Cannot ignore the consequences. So now we're starting to see this corruption unravel because politicians are like, oh, you know, all these politicians who have $180 million and they're only making, you know, like
$500,000.
Or no, their salaries are like $150,000 a year or something.
It's fucking asinine.
And it's like, oh, it's like everybody is like, oh, well, they do speaking engagements. They have books, right? No,
they play the market that they regulate.
This is like grade A corruption at its finest, and it's like
letting referees bet on the games that they referee. It doesn't make any sense.
It's insane. And so that's all happening, you know, and like. And I think that people are waking up to it, but as that happens, it's some real fourth turning shit. You know what I mean? Like it's creating these social divides, these ideologic rifts. And you know, I mean, I have to be careful because I'm living in a world of physicians, and you know, I would like to think by and large I'm respected. I've 20 years. I'm a board certified ER doc. I'm a medical expert. So like. I have to be, you know, cognizant of my role in that clique, in that world as a physician. And, you know, and a lot of physicians are poisoned by the current, you know, thought structure. And you know, so it's very interesting for me, kind of straddling that line of being a Bitcoiner, seeing, you know, what I perceive to be the truth. I mean, you know, again, don't really believe in anything. So if somebody was like, are you 100% sure Bitcoin is going to be adopted? I would have to be like, well, not 100%. I can't be 100% on anything except for math, you know? And like, even though I want it to be, and I think it's 99.9%, you know, like as a scientist, it could be disproven by something.
And frankly, we can't even be 100% certain on math because, you know, there was a time when negative numbers were a fiction and imaginary numbers didn't exist. And like, there's been all these things that were impossible mathematically that now exist. So like,
that's true. And I remember in calculus, even they were making an argument that 1 + 1 isn't 2. It's actually like this limit function of 1.9999 forever. And like they solve for it. And I was like, that's crazy.
It's
so maybe you're right.
We live in we're in a sea of entropy and uncertainty, and we're looking for these islands to anchor our belief structures too. And whatever Bitcoin is, you know, we talked earlier about how life is that thing that converts entropy into order. And that's a pretty good description of Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin mining algorithm, you know, becomes more difficult as more people try to mine it. So it becomes more entropic. And then the blocks of transactions that it issues ossify into the most certain thing we've ever had, right? Like whatever's in that time chain is inarguable.
It's memorialized.
It's inarguable. It's like you can, I mean, you can not believe it, but it's like you can not believe in gravity, but gravity's still gravity, and the time chain's still the time chain. And it's radical because humans created that. It's the only thing, everything else that's immutable in that way is part of the cosmos, right? Like the
Yeah.
laws of physics and gravity. And I mean, I guess we could say mathematics, even though mathematics is something we're kind of like mapping the structures of reality. This is the first socioeconomic structure we've created that has that shares in that immutability property.
Yeah, and it solves for problem like the Byzantine general problem. I just love it.
Yeah.
You know, like I love these. I love the solution, like the simple solution it brings to the human condition, where there's all kinds of market participants. You don't know who's lying or telling the truth. Incentives are kind of to lie anyway right now to make the most money, and it solves for those problems. And it's just it's like it's a technological marvel.
Yes.
And in its simplicity, because it's actually just this open source, like simple code. It's not like, but the system, you know, between the difficulty adjustment and the distributed ledger, and I mean, it's mind boggling, honestly. And you know, the best answers are often simple, and it is relatively simple. Like that's why people are complexifying it, and to make all these like Ethereum and Solana and XRP, which is like, I'm sorry, the biggest joke. The biggest grift of all. And I feel so bad for everybody, you know, who's going to be grifted again. But I think that Bitcoin fundamentally changes like our social fabric. And that in and of itself is priceless, because the social fabric for so long, at a certain point outside of like our nucleus of either family or town or village, or at some point it becomes a million centralized bubbles that are competing for scarce resources, and then people die. And so that scarcity changes because Bitcoin pops all those bubbles and integrates everyone in a decentralized mesh and network where everybody benefits. So the cool thing is that I've come onto recently is even the laggards, even the people who don't buy Bitcoin and don't have this. See, the bridge right now is building wealth, right? That's part of the journey, is becoming economically stable, and your Bitcoin goes up in value. So even when you even these superficial first steps onto the bridge, you know, Bitcoiners, anyone who starts buying Bitcoin and takes that step, and they might not realize it's a bridge yet, and they might come back, they might buy it, they might, it doubled, and they sell it, and they didn't understand that it was a bridge yet, and they'll come back to it later, and we all get Bitcoin at the price we deserve, whatever. You know, like at some point, that bridge is so many things. It's not only an economic journey to stability, safety, security, where you're quote unquote worth more money because you've got more Bitcoin, and you can spend it on a Lambo, or you could do nothing with it. I haven't touched my Bitcoin. You know, like I'm not going to say I still live fiat poor. I got. And I try and, you know, they like, we talk about, you know, you never have enough Bitcoin. I have enough Bitcoin. Like we should feel abundant. I have enough love. I have like, I'm good enough. Like I have enough morality. Like I feel good about myself. And like, we only have so much time, as you were talking about, you know, we only have scarcity of time. So like, you know, that bridge is more than just an economic bridge. And the first few steps are economic because you're benefiting. But then when you start to go down that rabbit hole, you realize that bridge it's a bridge of morality. It's a bridge of character growth. It's a bridge of self-actualization. It can be, right? It can be all those things. On the most superficial layer for a lot of us, maybe most of us, and I live in the superficial aspects of this as well a lot of time. I'm not always intellectualizing this. But, you know, it's such a journey to cross that bridge, and the end goal is enlightenment. It's freedom for society and hope, and it's like all these positive things. It's morality. It's like a better, more moral and just society. It's you know, and I think it's something that quite honestly, has always been programmed into humanity's DNA, vis-a-vis evolution. And the fact that as these parallel systems, technology is creating AI, which is about to change everything. It's already changing everything. But AI, robotics, and all these other things. But AI, I mean, we may very well soon have super intelligence. AI is literally about to take us vertical in what we're able to do, and probably take away jobs. And I mean, it's so hyper deflationary that it's like the end of the road probably for an inflationary fiat system, because you can't have an inflationary money system when nobody even has a job. Like, what does money even mean? Like, there's going to be a transition period. And I think Bitcoin is that transition period to a time of abundance. And I don't know how long the bridge lasts. You know, but there's a lot of thought there.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify there, because when people hear that, the euphemism inflation, deflation, they tend to think inflation good, deflation bad. And it couldn't be, it's the exact opposite, right? Like when you say AI is deflationary, it's solving consumer wants or solving problems better, faster, cheaper, right? Like, you know, your attorney is cheaper, your graphic designer is cheaper, your accountant is cheaper, you know, whatever fields that AI augments, it augments them in a way to make them more productive, which is to say to make them cheaper. And that lowering of prices, which is equivalent to like the advancing of standards of living, right? As prices go down, standards of living go up. That is incompatible with the fiat paradigm. That depends on the constant increase of prices via currency counterfeiting to erode real debt burdens, of which the government is the biggest debtor. Like it's a big kind of download, but I just wanted to hit that point, because sometimes when people hear that, like, oh my God, job destruction and deflation, like it sounds terrible. It's like, actually, that's literally how civilization advances.
But it is terrible to the system. It's very threatening.
Threatening to the fiat paradigm. Yes. But threatening to a horrible thing, right? The thing that lies to you and steals from you and wages endless war. Like,
and the market is naturally deflationary.
Yes, that's what a market is supposed to do. Deflate prices. Solve problems better, faster, cheaper.
Like if we can get, like, what's the ultimate goal? Like if we can get to where everything is free or near free.
Right. Then there's nothing to fight over.
There's nothing to fight over. And it's like, let's make poetry. And sit around the campfire and love each other. You know, it's like all this kind of like.
Yeah, it gets very idealistic. But again, moving that direction is a definite net benefit. Not to say that you would ever achieve it, right? Just like, you know, none of us will ever not be sinners, but it is good to strive to not sin, right?
And there'll be jealousy, and there'll be problems with love and affair.
That's how I tweeted the other day. I think we were going back and forth about it. Like 7 things Bitcoin doesn't solve: gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, lust, pride, envy. Like, I don't think it's ever going to solve sin. But it will reduce our motivations perhaps to engage in sin so much. Right?
Do we have 7 virtues? 7?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either. I haven't looked it up, but maybe I'm sure some people have thought of it and tried to create them. But think about it. The fact that we don't know that, that shows you that the whole of our like philosophical understanding, fiat, like where we've come from, is to kind of focus on like why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you talk about the natural counterforce of the 7 virtues? Like there has to be 7 opposites and 7 virtues, and those are probably you know, right? Like
there's something in the Bible about like love is patient, love is kind, love does not. There's something there, but
we should look. I mean, there's probably an answer in the Bible.
I don't think there's. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. So I want to ask you about this. I don't. Are you doing a PhD thesis or dissertation?
Oh no. Yeah. Okay. So I have an interesting.
Okay.
So I think that someday, clearly, there will be classes on Bitcoin, and you know, I mean, we have so far to go. I like how Jeff Booth was saying we're like the internet in 1969, and it was 20 years before, you know, and we haven't even seen you know what's coming, and the future is like down the road, obviously, and so I think that right now there is a discovery period. It's like a gold rush, and it's an intellectual gold rush. And right now we're defining the principles, and we've got guys like Saylor, you know, and who knows where everybody lies on it, but like a PhD, you have to give a dissertation. You create a new part of the body of knowledge,
right?
And it's a philosophy doctorate. And if you've put in your 10 years or maybe 10,000 hours, maybe some people can do it in 5 years or whatever. It takes 5 years to get a PhD, net on net, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know, but I think that like we are the initial PhDs. We're contributing to the body of philosophy of Bitcoin. We have a lot more to learn. And I think of a PhD as like a black belt in karate or something. It's like a starting point,
right?
Like where you know, that's just like means you've got the basics figured out. So I don't think a PhD even like means that much. But I think like Saylor has a PhD in Bitcoin. Like you have a PhD in Bitcoin. Like, no, I know it sounds crazy to think about, but think about how much.
I mean, there's just like, it's such a vast hyper object thing. Like there's so many facets of it that I have so little understanding, specifically on the technical side.
Yeah.
So like I would be very hesitant to ever describe myself that way.
Understood.
But thank you.
No. I mean, understood.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, that's like I'm an emergency medicine doc. I'm an MD.
Right.
I'm a medical doctor.
Yeah.
If somebody comes in and they've got cataracts or they've got nearsightedness or, you know, or their eye, a BB went through their eye and their eye has collapsed, I have no idea what to do. I'm a medical doctor. I have no idea. You know what I do? I give them some pain medication. I call up my buddy, the ophthalmologist. I'm like, dude, I've got, you know, retinal detachment, you know, 26-year-old hitting the eye with a baseball. Okay, send them up. We'll take them to the lab. I'll put the retina back on the back of the eye. So like, you know, you can have a PhD in an area of physics and not know the first thing about plasma physics type of thing. Right. You like, maybe you're like a strong lay person.
Yeah.
So I think that, and then PhDs in philosophy, you know, I mean, that's like so like nebulous. And so I do think that anybody who's contributing to the body of knowledge, you know, whether it's technical or philosophical, you know, like has a master's or a bachelor's or a PhD. And of course, like a PhD 20 years down in their career discovers relativity, you know, or like it's just a start. And although we don't actually have degrees, and honestly, I think degrees and stuff on the wall is kind of a fiat concept.
It's going away, yeah.
Yeah,
With the
it's
internet,
like you can learn from YouTube now. But so, but that's my thought on. That's my thought on kind of like the academic or intelligentsia around Bitcoin is that we should all, like, if we've put in the time and we've studied it, we should all realize that there's a lot more to know and that we haven't even scratched the surface. And like when people are like, I understand Bitcoin, you know, especially no coiners and they're like, I've spent the time, I've done the research. I'm like, dude, I've spent thousands of hours, not hundreds, thousands of hours, maybe 10,000, like literally over the last 10 years. And I still have so much to learn.
Yes.
And then, you know, we're building new structures on top of and all the meta layers of Bitcoin. I mean, it's like,
I can't help but laugh out loud when I read people online saying, no, I completely understand Bitcoin. I've known about it. I'm just like,
it's like that's a conversation.
This, you know what it is? It's the same spirit of that person that says, I don't have any inner darkness. It's like, oh, you are the darkest human. And you're the darkest human in your soul, period. As soon as you think that, it's like this totalitarian mindset. Right? You think you know it all, or you think there's nothing left to be learned or explored. Like that is an evil. I don't want to say it is evil, but it definitely sets you up for evil, because then all of a sudden you think you know best, no matter what. If you think you know, you have no opportunity to learn, right? Like curiosity is an aspect of humility, right? You have to have enough humility to know you don't know it all, to even be curious and learn and grow whatsoever.
That's right. And it's ego strength, honestly. You know, and again, Jeff talks about ego death.
Yes.
You know, but ego death is really like you know, the ego doesn't like die.
It's a continuous process. I think of death and renewal. And again, I think of like, again, the Christ archetype. Like every time you die and you resurrect as something new, right? Your old beliefs die, your old belief structures, your old identity will die. And then from its ashes emerges a new level of understanding.
Does it come back stronger or better or somehow?
Different,
or is it just different?
Different for sure, right? I mean, you could probably take that process and apply it the wrong direction. You know, you could go be a whatever statist Fiat. You know, if you just learned about that.
Yeah. I think as long as we're alive and we have the ability to progress and grow.
Yeah.
And self-actualize.
Yes.
I think that our egos, which are, you can think of an ego as like the little kid inside of you, who gets hurt very easily and has a tantrum, and you know, Freud talks about the super ego, the id, and the ego, and the id is just like this animal, you know, like it's like it's like our like inner beast,
lizard brain,
which is a great thing to get in touch with, you know, and whether or not these three things exist, or you want to define it differently and call it something else. There's something that we consensually refer to as the ego. Yeah. And it seems to be that part of us that gets defensive, that, you know, that refuses to see the bridge, that refuses to admit that we're wrong when there's a preponderance of evidence that we are. And even in the face of evidence, will even create new evidence. It'll do all these crazy things. And so, you know, instead of ego death, I like to think about it as like ego strengthening. Like if your ego becomes like very, very, very strong, and that doesn't mean big. Yeah. Like I think the stronger an ego is, the smaller it needs to be. Yeah. Yeah. And like complete ego death, I think is like maybe impossible. Like I think ego death is like an ideal that you should aim for. I think like true ego death is something actually they describe when you take like 4 grams of mushrooms or something, you know, and you like don't even know, you're totally disassociated. And you're like in a different universe. You don't even realize you exist.
Yeah, I would think it's the continual death and rebirth process. The more that is intensified or accelerated, the more adaptive the ego becomes. That's the language I would like to put around it. And I think, you know, what did Darwin say? It's not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent species that survives. It's the one that's most responsive to change. Yeah, the most adaptive. Like so if you become hyper adaptive to new circumstances, you're able to, which is the human superpower, right? Is that we get to carve out our own niche and adapt to basically any environment. Right. And we actually use our intelligence to adapt our environments to us. And so the more flexible and malleable the ego is, the more attuned it is to that reality. And, you know, it's like what did Heraclitus say, that no man steps in the same river twice. It's not the same river. It's not the same man. Like that's the reality. It's like we're changing all the time. We're immersed in impermanence. And the more we accept that truth and reality, that our ego will always need to adapt to that ever flowing river of time, the more in touch with the truth we are.
So let me ask you this, and I haven't thought about this yet. So this is like a de novo question that I'd like to think about also. Why are we adapting? Why have we decided to adapt? And what are we adapting away from and towards with Bitcoin, with our you know, and I don't know the answer. And I'm just literally asking that. And I haven't put a time or thought into this yet. And I could come off with like a prima facie or off the cuff answer and say, well, we've suffered moral injury, and money aside, like we put our foot on the bridge and we instantly, you know, at some point, like we realized we had to adapt morally so that we could grow as human beings and become better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would think even zooming out away from Bitcoin, you could sort of see the predecessors in which direction that evolutionary path was going. Yeah. And I'll just throw out a couple of like speculations here, but one seems to be like we're moving towards greater and greater human freedom, right? Like if you just very broad strokes from ancient pharaoh god kings in Egypt, where there's 2 or 3 or 1 god king and everyone else is like subhuman, basically, right?
Slave.
We've moved from that sort of highly centralized power structure to the U.S. Constitution, right? Or all men are equal in the eyes of the law, or equal in the eyes of God. So there's more of this like, and I think Christ has a lot to do with this, right? The equality of souls, and how Christ gave us freedom so that we may be free. These things become codified into our legal structure. So broadly, we move towards more human freedom. And as maybe a sub-component of that, more specific to Bitcoin, is that we're hopefully evolving away from coercion and towards consent. Yeah. Right. Like really truly treating each other as the rational, compassionate animals that we are capable of being. Yeah. I'm not saying that we are all definitively rational and compassionate at all times, but we're all at least capable of it. And when we do acknowledge that aspect of ourselves and treat one another accordingly, we do unlock these objectively superior dimensions of being, right? Like more economic prosperity, more innovation, more better language, more celebration, like all the human flourishing basically gets unlocked when we start treating one another as family, basically, right? That there, as you said earlier, it's, the word kin is related to the word, well, it's first of all related to the word kind, which is interesting, right? Like to be kind is like how you treat your kin.
But kinder.
It's also related to the word kingdom, right? Okay. And if you trace back the evolutionary history, like we are all in one kingdom, right? It was like, I think it was fungi splits into plants and animals at some point, and then the whole rest of the tree of life. Like we are in one kingdom.
Right.
So hopefully we're moving towards that a little bit. Like obviously there's still a lot of complexities, like, oh, what about the animals? We eat the animals, and like, I'm a huge carnivore, so I don't know the way out of that one, right? Are we going to innovate our way out of meat? I have no idea, but it doesn't seem likely for me. It is delicious.
Well, I mean, you're saying all this, and I'm thinking about humanity as just being like a child, just growing up.
We're like an adolescent,
And like maybe we're just at this. Maybe the natural evolution is to moralize and to grow up.
Yeah.
And maybe part of the growing up, and I think with a species or with a society, it happens at more of a glacial pace.
Yeah.
And it happens in a much slower, deliberate way with that tonus that you were talking about, that dynamic push and pull. And, I think that maybe the moralization of humanity and changes of incentive structures to become more like that Star Trek utopia, maybe it's inevitable. And hopefully, because the opposite of that is we self-destruct, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's a great
Nobody
point.
wants that.
That's a great point. And then, you would, if, what do evolutionary biologists say? Replicators replicate, right? So like the primary impulse of life is self-replication.
Right.
So it would stand to reason that this process of moralization, or updating our moral software, to be more specific,
I love that, by
to
the way.
respect and acknowledge the actuality of the individual, right? That like in physical temporal reality, we are actually acting individuals. We have purposes and aims, and we can thwart one another, or we can collaborate, and there's all these possibilities. But the atomic unit, if you will, of that structure is the individual. So the more that our moral and social and legal codes adhere to that reality, the more we unlock the progress, the capacity for replication of the species, right? We be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, we unlock that potential. Yeah.
Yes.
What's really interesting that makes me think is I've been thinking about Bitcoin as a moral imperative, and of course that kind of presupposes like more of the objective, morality. So all that stuff aside, and that conversation aside, because it's interesting philosophically, if most people agree that it's the more happiness in the world, the less pain and suffering, like that's moral. That's what we want. Everybody, I think everybody, if asked, would press a button and make it some kind of utopia where everybody is happy and healthy and experiences love and self-actualization. And so like for those reasons, now we finally have a tool to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why Bitcoiners are so passionate and looked at like cultists, because as like a secular religion or whatever, Bitcoin is actually, for the first time in humanity, a real tool to realign incentives and to create that future. Yeah. And whether or not it's inevitable, I think that Bitcoiners feel that very deeply, like a moral imperative create that better future to like, you know, to it's, and I think it's going to happen, you know, and I like the Steve Jobs quote about the crazy ones, or, you know, let them cook basically, because they're the ones that change the world. And I think that Bitcoin is offers a very unique and powerful opportunity for once people start walking on the bridge. You can be totally selfish and just spend all your time in your own little world with your Bitcoin and have fun with your Bitcoins. But you can also use your knowledge to like help bring people across. And it has, you know, it has its challenges, right? Like these certain personality types are 0% Bitcoiners, and it's challenging with family, and it can be frustrating if you're a Bitcoiner because you're like, they won't listen to me. This is like going to make everything better. So it's a very unique place to be, and you got to walk that line. You got to be, and so I think Saylor does a really good job because he's in a massive position of influence and power now. And if he were to be like a toxic maxi, that would be so counterproductive to where we're at in this moment of history. So like, you know, I like sometimes I'm on, you know, X a bunch, and like sometimes I want to like virtually slap toxic Bitcoiners and be like, dude, let the man cook. Like the end goal is like you don't, this dude is way smarter. You know, like, don't worry, let him cook. He's got it.
You're just playing checkers and he's playing 4D chess.
Right? Let him cook, and he's gonna do it. You know, like just go buy some more Bitcoin and orange pill your family members, and we'll be good.
No, that's a great point. And then there's this like, what's the old, I forget who said this too, but you know, the state is the great fiction that you can coerce one group of people to live at the expense of another group of people.
It's so true.
Right? It's utter
like
bullshit
axiomatic
to the core, right? Like the reality is you are responsible for yourself, right? We can have consensual agreements with other people to share and distribute responsibility. That's what families are. That's what businesses are. That's what communities are.
Right.
But you can't bludgeon someone over the head to give you their stuff and expect that to be a sustainable relationship.
And it's what's happening.
Doesn't matter if you institutionalize it. Doesn't matter if you put nice words around it. Doesn't matter if you call it wokeism. Doesn't matter if you call it liberal democracy. It's bullshit all the way to the core.
It's rotten
in
to the
reality.
Core.
And so,
and it hurts people. It has a real world consequence.
Again, yes, it is subjectively created, but it's objectively bad, right? If human flourishing is your metric. And so this is where I used to get a lot of pushback on this, but I hope it's starting to make more sense. I said that Bitcoin is more American in spirit than the US Constitution.
I love that.
So the US Constitution is great inspiration, motivation, design. Like it got us this far, right? It's been phenomenal. But at the end of the day, it's just scribbles on a sheet of paper. Right? It can be ignored. It can be misinterpreted. It can whatever. But Bitcoin is different. You can't misinterpret Bitcoin.
No.
You can't argue with Bitcoin, right? It's this vortex of incentives, this immutable history. Like it's a technology way more evolved than feather, pen, and paper. Right? It's in the same spirit. It's in the same vein of kind of life, liberty, and property, but it's more effective. It's got more teeth.
Well, it's unstoppable. I mean, it's like a self-fulfilling, virtuous, profit. It's like its own. It's like a living, breathing animal that is taking over. It is crashing everything to zero against it, and I don't mean just economically, which it's clearly doing. Just look at any chart. But it's doing that with morality. It's doing that and it's creating people who, you know, I love going on to X sometimes and seeing people who are like, you know, ever since adopting a Bitcoin principle, I've been working out. I've adopted a low time. I'm just getting in shape. And like, I'm like, you are becoming self-Bitcoinized. Bitcoinized. You know, like you are becoming a better version of yourself. And you're using Bitcoin to do it.
And that's a feature, not a bug of Bitcoin.
It's a feature. And so I think the founding fathers would have been like, oh shit, this is good. This is freedom. This is pure. This is freedom. You know, and you know what the average age of the founding fathers
were?
They're
like what? Early 30s, maybe?
26.
Yeah, 26. Crazy. Yeah.
Like some of them were 19. Isn't that, it's amazing. So it was like, you know, in the, and we look at the kids right now in the Doge who are doing the cleanup, they're all like these giga brains. And you know, they're the future. Like these ultra smart, like kids get it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like a 50-year-old Bitcoiner who got into it when I was 40.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've always kind of been out there as an ER doc. I did American Ninja Warrior for a long time. And like, I've always kind of been an adventurer and pushed reality and life to its limits because I want to experience everything. And Bitcoin was natural, you know, and it was like a natural, like, okay, let's dive in. Let's see what it's all about. And even after diving in, it still took me years.
Yeah.
I still played the stupid games and won the stupid prizes.
Yeah.
And I'm not like a dummy. So like it's, you know, and sometimes actually I think that some of the people who don't go as deep are kind of lucky initially because, you know, I came into it, I had multiple feet on the bridge, still didn't realize what it was.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's a great point. And to have, I don't know, patience, humility, grace, both with yourself and with others. I hope that we see more of that in Bitcoin culture. Like I'm like you, I think Bitcoin toxicity, there's just a bunch of like, I get very judgmental about it, right? I see kids being bullies on a playground and I'm like, what are you doing? Bro? Yeah. It's just kind of like and look, I'm not trying to detract from it completely, call out the scams, call out the scammers. But then when you say things like, everybody's a scammer, which there was a piece written about this in 2014 that's actually pretty good. Yeah. But they adopted that title as like a mantra. Yeah. When you actually dissect that sentence, everybody is a scammer. Yeah. You're saying nothing, right? You've not added any information to the equation. You're just saying everyone's a scammer. We get it. Yeah. It's like, exactly. So there's that component of, I don't know, I guess more humility that I hope Bitcoin brings. And I think it does. I think it does in the curiosity, and a lot of what we see online is not what maps onto the real world.
The Bitcoiners that I see that have evolved and like listening to podcasts for the last 10 years and and seeing Bitcoiners, they tend to mellow out. Yeah. Especially. And they tend to like have stronger egos, or you know, their ego's so strong that it's dead, I guess. Like
or they more don't adaptive. Need it
yeah, or more adaptive, right? More adaptive egos. And they tend to be like, okay, well, you're here on your journey. I'm totally accepting of that. And let's just talk. Yeah. You know, we're people. Yeah. And we both want more love and happiness.
Yeah. That's the most beautiful thing about it, is that it is a humanitarian movement at its core. Yeah. And so the last thing I wanted to ask you was like, and we've already sort of answered this, I guess, to some extent in some ways, but like, what are theories, ideas, why people have such a difficult time accepting, not even accepting Bitcoin, even just beginning the journey across that bridge? I know we said, you know, it kind of takes some pain, or it takes the prospect of gain to get their feet on the bridge, but like, what else, like as a Bitcoin educator, like we're always looking for the new ways to deliver the orange pill, or to open people's eyes to thinking about taking the orange pill. Like what are some approaches that we're not doing that we possibly could?
Yeah. And that's the $1 million question. I mean, obviously I don't have all the answers, and I'm searching for that answer also. And since we talked about this a bit, I'm going to take it from a different angle to inject some new information and thoughts for people to mull around on, including myself, which is I have to come at this from within my specialty, which is emergency medicine, which is medicine. And medicine is, as we talked about way earlier in the conversation, sadly corrupt to the core, and everybody knows it, and doctors are losing trust, and the suicide rate for physicians is twice normal. And we talked about the moral injury, and we talked a lot about this stuff. So but we do have an answer, and we do have a tool. And although there should be, honestly, we need some emergency band-aids from within the current paradigm. And so those are being built. Like there's some Bitcoiners made Crowd Health. I think that's an incredible, I've got no disclosures. I don't have any financial arrangement with them. So
they're a former sponsor, but I'm a current member. And it's cool.
I've been a member of Sedera for many years, and I'm switching over to Crowd Health right now. Yeah. But you know, like the 1 second plug is it's get rid of insurance, which is like as corrupt as you can get, and do a crowd share, crowdsource, you know, so that you're protected, and and you don't need to be a Bitcoin or anything.
Community savings pool for health
and
stuff.
It's pretty cheap, you know, compared to insurance. And it's like, and they're great guys. So I think those are solutions from within the current paradigm that eventually can become Bitcoin solutions. And so, you know, I love promoting Bitcoin businesses and
so
whatnot.
just coming at Bitcoin from other value propositions other than money, you're saying, right? Like if someone were to sign up for Crowd Health, they don't need to be a Bitcoiner, but they might become a Bitcoiner in their journey.
Yeah, you made the leap instantly. Yeah. So for me, for physicians, and part of the reason why I'm writing this self-help book that's called Self-Bitcoinization, and I've got this, you know, it's like I've got this like head fake in there, which is I've got a whole chapter on medicine, the problems with medicine. And so I'm going to be promoting the book, and I hope others will help me, to my physician colleagues who are so turned off from Bitcoin because of all the reasons we talked about. And I hope that when you make a moral argument for Bitcoin, and not just an argument, but like you can see that there's actual, like you said, teeth to it. Like it's an actual strong, like if you accept the fact that there's problems in the world today and that there's a lot of immorality, and if you see the potential for moving to an abundant, if you see the potential for fulfilling everybody's needs at a basal level, and if you start to understand, like this stuff is not rocket science. So if you understand the argument, and I think physicians are very capable of understanding this on a metacognitive level, then it's like, okay, well, I guess buying Bitcoin is like kind of a vote for a more moral system.
For sure.
Okay, I get that. Maybe it's not like I'm trying to like be part of a Ponzi scheme, or maybe it's not a Ponzi scheme. Maybe it's like, maybe it's got this economic part where people keep making more money and there's a greater fool thing that people talk about, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the adoption, maybe it's the actual adoption of a new money system. Maybe it's the actual adoption of a more moral system. Maybe this could actually change society. Maybe this could allow me to practice medicine without my moral injury. Maybe this could allow me to stop worrying about money. Because doctors now, more than ever, when I started medicine 20 years ago, I never thought about money. I got out, and my first paychecks, I was like, holy fuck. I was like, my bank account was just going up. I don't buy yachts and boats and stuff. So like, now I got $200,000 in my account. Now I got $400,000 in my account. It just keeps going up. I better get some stocks. Okay, I guess I can get a nice house. You know, and I've got a lot of student loans, but the interest rate's low. You know, like, what do I do with this money? So I bought some gold and silver. I buy a safe to put it in. You know, and I was that guy who didn't really care or need anything because I was making money. But now, 20 years later, and the new docs don't realize this, but having watched it, all of us old docs, we've seen reimbursement versus inflation and purchasing power go down over time, you know, steadily as it's extracted from the system, from the administrators, from the bureaucracy.
As the parasite feeds.
From the parasites, from insurance companies, which are like insanely parasitic on patients and doctors and everybody in healthcare. And so I think doctors more than ever have side gigs and we're trying to make money and we're working harder shifts. We're working more to make the ends meet. And it's like, gosh, in my book, I talk about this young couple I met. They've got $900,000 in student debt. Jeez. They're both 30. They're dead broke.
Wow.
They just got out. It's at 8% interest.
Jeez.
They've got no money. And so all of a sudden they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of income, but they don't have a house.
Right.
They want to have kids. They'll push off the kids 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, so like it's a real problem in medicine for physicians. And physicians have been pushed to the sides. The ACA made it so that we can't own our own hospitals people don't realize that.
Why?
The law changed so that physicians can't own hospitals any longer. So now that's like saying,
That's insane.
Engineers couldn't own an engineering firm.
It always blows my mind when the state interferes with being able to own anything. Like when they outlawed private gold ownership. It's like, who the fuck are you to tell any human what they can own and not own? That's consensual contract between two consenting adults. Has nothing to do with the state whatsoever.
It's maddening.
It is deeply maddening.
It's maddening. And so like, and the answer, and then, but you go from that. So physicians are becoming aware of that as a problem. I'd say a good 70, 80% of physicians feel moral injury, feel that there's a problem with the system, think that the solutions are from within the system. Almost nobody is thinking outside of the system.
Not thinking deeply enough.
Where the solutions come from, actually, right?
Yeah.
The solution we know is not in that paradigm. It's not in there. So physicians need to wake the fuck up.
Yeah.
And like, yes, let's make some Band-Aid solutions, but dudes, wake the fuck up. You know, doctors, wake the fuck up. And like, it's crazy. It's like, and you say, buy some Bitcoin. And it's like, wow, that dude's crazy. So it's like, so you have to say, no, wake the fuck up. And it's a moral argument. Like, let's talk, like, just give me an hour of your time and let me explain, the way we're seeing this, the way that it's moralizing people, and then why it can realign incentives, and how it can fix medicine over a longer period of time. Yes, we need a solution right now, which is the crowd healths and the direct practice and price transparency and decentralization of medical records. And I can fix medicine right now. Let me do it. You know, like, I think a lot of us docs could fix it immediately.
Just get the state out of it largely, right?
That's like a huge part of it. I mean, you know, and
which is like the solution to every problem. That's the solution to the money too. Get the state out of the money. Get the state out of the money. Just take the state out of the money and let the market sort it out.
And the market's gonna evolve and adapt into something that's more moral.
Yes.
You know, so even without Bitcoin, if you just let the market do that, it would be at least livable.
Right. We've been on a gold standard.
Yeah. It would have been the industrialists in the
Bitcoin may have never been invented, actually, because the acute pain of fiat is why Bitcoin was invented.
That's right.
Yeah. So the state, like, in creating this pain, and this is back to the utility of evil, perhaps, like the evil becomes so acute that it eventually gives birth to something really good to annihilate the evil.
Right. And a lot of medicine is predicated on that too. You got to give allergy shots to you know. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I was struggling to come up with the term where the dosage of the medicine that's harmful, but it actually is beneficial. Hormesis. Hormesis, I think, is the term they use.
Maybe.
It's where they give you a little bit of poison, but it's actually therapeutic. You know.
Oh, homeopathy.
Maybe. I could be wrong. I thought hormesis was the term Taleb uses.
Probably. No, I mean, it would make sense. That's still the same term. And
yeah, neither here nor there. It's like, it's something like that. Like the pain and accumulates, and then eventually something good can come of it. Not always, but
and medicine's very dogmatic. So you know, to be clear, a lot of Western medicine is blinders on, evidence based, data driven. Like, okay, acupuncture works. We get it. Like, there's data to show that it actually works, but we can't define it. So just do it if you want. It's not. We also can't profit off of it.
It seems like they ignore all preventative aspects of medicine.
It's horrible.
It's just reactive.
I talk about this in the health chapter, you know, like medical school is medical education. Who's the primary funder? Big pharma. What the hell? Like, I got almost
what
zero.
What could go wrong?
I went to Tulane Medical School and I didn't learn anything about nutrition or preventative medicine. I mean, a little bit, okay, like a couple classes, but like, it was all, you know, how to treat this with this pill and like surgery and like, you know, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Exactly. Okay, I think, man, this has been a beautiful conversation, and something about like how Bitcoin aligns the motivation for self-preservation with the motivation to construct a social morality that's centered on human flourishing. You know, we've said it a lot of different ways, basically, but there's some miracle inside of Bitcoin that I think many others are struggling to articulate, that we've created alignment between the individual and the collective in a way we've never before had it.
Yes.
And now, again, if I go just into the abstract domain, I would say private property has been the attempt at that alignment, right? It's like where people compete within peaceful confines, basically, right? We compete non-violently.
Yeah.
So then we channel those competitive energies into productive channels, and we create more prosperity, basically.
Right.
But Bitcoin has taken that to another level, right? It's like, it's an update to private property, to speak abstractly. But if you wanted to go into the moral component, or the capitalistic component. It's like, it's morality 2.0 or capitalism 2.0, something like that too.
It's interesting. I like what you're saying. It does align the individual with society. And if we go back to our early conversation about like all humans being like nodes,
yes,
in
microorganisms and a macroorganism.
Yeah. And this aligns the micro with the macro.
Yes.
And I talk about this a little bit in my discussion in Self-Bitcoinization. Each one of us is a moral node. And whether or not we're part of the Bitcoin network or the Fiat network, and we're by definition all part of the Fiat network because that's the current paradigm. And very, very few people are like 100%. You still have to interface. 99.999% of us have to interface with Fiat. I get paid in Fiat. And so Bitcoin is an idea. And each one of us being a moral node, like a neuron in the greater brain or mind hive, which is humanity. Bitcoin's like an idea that like starts in part of that mind, and then is catching fire. It's being evaluated. It's being stress tested. It's being tortured. It's being blockwared. It's being adopted. It's being ETF'd. It's being it's being everything that's being as an idea to try and poke holes in it. Quantum computing. This. And as that idea propagates, and this happens over a long period of time because ideas at the societal level used to take hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then as technology improves, it kind of accelerates the computing power and the speed with which the human mind can understand ideas, adapt to them, grow them, stress test them. And so I think that Bitcoin as an idea is aligning interests, not only on the individual level within society, but inside of the human mind. It's aligning as, it's being toyed with. It's just kind of like right now the government is looking at a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and like you've got Bitcoiners in there, and I think they're using very politically neutral language on purpose because for a lot of obvious, like to come at it from an objective standpoint, right? Because we want to look at this and we want to poke holes in it, so they're studying it. And I think that is kind of like a similar to structure to what every human is doing collectively by contributing our voices to this one this one kind of loud, incessant hum or din, which is the human consciousness working on a solution to the problem, which is, man, how do we just make this reality even better for everyone? How do we give everyone more food and everyone, so I think that you're right. I think that Bitcoin.
I want to say that. I mean, I think the way you phrase it actually is really, really good. That there's creating a coherence between the micro and the macro. Right. Such that the whole system comes into a coherent vibration.
It starts working together.
Yes. And the word that came to mind here too, because again, like in fiat world, you have everything's incoherent, right? All these little regional monopolies on money with all the cascading consequences that brings in the territories. But this like cleanses the whole thing and brings coherence to the entire globe, right? And in a Bitcoinized future. And the word that came to mind for me was atonement. Right, atonement is typically reserved as like a religious word that you atone with God or you reconcile with God, or you come to terms. But embedded in that word are the words "at one ment." So it's actually bringing like a singular, resonant, coherent consciousness, perhaps even to Earth. And I tweeted this the other day. I was like, I think this is going to sound crazy right now, but I think it'll age well, that Bitcoin is the revolution in human consciousness that we've been waiting on. And I don't know, like it intuitively has some feelers on it. I'm not saying this is something I can lay out in a dissertation and make an objective truth or anything like that, but it does seem like this has that kind of potential. Like the single unifying symbolic canopy for a peaceful human civilization that stops fucking blowing ourselves up over and over and over again.
We have a destructive part of our personalities and our nature. And I think that, people smoke cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
And people do things that are unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I think that all of humanity, if you're thinking about this hive mind or society, it has a self-similar way of doing that as well. Society smokes cigarettes.
Yeah.
And one cigarette happens to be fiat currency and scarcity mentality and all this stuff. And so I think as we grow up, and maybe we're like, experimenting with all these things and see, okay, we're seeing things. And I think that collectively we're like, okay, well, this is unhealthy and things are breaking and they keep breaking. And part of the problem is each one of us as neurons, we only live 70 years.
Yeah. Right.
Whereas the human species as a child has been alive for umpteen thousand years or 100,000. Yeah. So like we're growing, like we each contribute as these little neurons or nodes or different cells in an organism. And the wisdom is forgotten on individual levels and it needs to keep relearning. Yeah. So we each stand on the shoulders of giants. And that's why I was talking about how important it is for us to be growing the body of understanding of decentralized solutions. Yeah. And Bitcoin, and actually this is an aside, but Bitcoin is such a loaded, stigmatized term that a lot of times with physicians, and this will answer another question, how do we approach this? I've started saying like, look, the reason decentralization is so important to medicine is this, and this. Imagine you had your records and you could bring your health records and so I don't even talk about Bitcoin for a long time with physicians. And like if I'm doing like a physician oriented, unless I'm talking about like pragmatically as an investment, because I can do that, right? Yeah. Like I can put on that hat and I've got a Series 65 and I can talk about why Bitcoin is interesting as, because of its Sharpe ratio, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I think that might actually be an answer for some of these ESTF, ESTJs and stuff.
I see.
Like maybe we start talking about decentralization being an interesting, how can decentralization help us? How could blockchain technology? So, and I have the same idea, I have a very different idea from a lot of people. And let me digress for a moment here about the whole altcoin market, which I think it's beautiful how there's now how it's like exponentiating and becoming more and more worthless every day, and how it's decoupled. I don't know if you've seen this. It's actually decoupled from Bitcoin.
Bitcoin's tearing away.
It's the first time.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, and I'll just spend 2 seconds on this, the whole altcoin market is an idea factory. It's a crowdsourced idea factory that is accretive to Bitcoin. Yeah. And it just represents future ideas of things that will add value.
Bitcoin testnet.
It'll exactly. It's a Bitcoin testnet, and it will all of it will go to zero. Yeah. But it will all create.
But they might discover some useful things that end up on Bitcoin. Yeah. Potentially.
And if it's useful enough. Yeah. Like Ethereum is this world computer, and like and smart contracts, and is this interesting? Like, and so like now with like. L-hands and like Taproot and Segwit, like, is all this stuff going to yield something valuable? Like, maybe. And if it does, like, what are the applications? And like, so we're getting these ideas from the shitcoin market where people are gambling and they're, but the problem is we've conflated value with it. Yeah. And that's how we're rewarding the entrepreneurs. Yeah. To build and create. And so just as an aside, I think it's an essential, natural part of this ecosystem, and I think eventually it all goes to zero. Yeah. And if it doesn't, maybe it was meant to be. Yeah. And something actually.
That's my big thing. It's like, just let the market decide. Why I don't need to be out here beating a drum, like tear it all down. It's like, well, just let the market take care of it. And if you're dumb enough to buy it, then the market will teach you. I do like that. In the same way cigarettes are bad for your health, fiat is bad for your wealth.
Yeah, it was bad for society, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, and wealth is what upholds society in a way, right?
Because aggregate wealth. Because it melts. It's rotten. However you want to look at it.
Well, what is wealth? Wealth is the accumulated solutions to future problems, right? Like you have accumulated some food or house or whatever is going to meet your preferences and needs over this future span of time.
And then what is money? It's a way to maintain the value of that and store it.
To help us to cooperate to produce more of it, right? Yeah. Like the liquidity or the language that helps us produce more of it. And I think in that way, fiat is not neutral, right? It's not neutral. Actually, it is bad for wealth. It impairs aggregate wealth production basically by integrating theft into the money supply. Well, then people can't conserve the fruits of their labor, so people can't invest properly. It distorts price signals, causes capital misallocation, boom and bust business cycle. Like it is fucking poison for the human global economy, basically. And we could call that global consciousness or whatever else. The coherence of global civilization is severely impaired when you break its signaling system.
And ironically, it was also, like you alluded to, necessary probably to create Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, there's
and it probably fast forwarded us to this place where now technologically, like the reason we have we have iPhones, like this crazy supercomputer in our pocket is probably because of scarcity mentality, fiat currency, and capitalism's role in it.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, this brought us to a place quicker where, you know, where Bitcoin becomes like a thing, a viable thing.
Yeah. The irony is endless, right? Because if you consider that a lot of these technologies were, you know, either invented or adapted in military context, not all of them, but you know, cryptography and things like that, some of our worst things that we've ever been through, hopefully, like the optimistic silver lining outlook would be, we're now learning those lessons and applying them to things that can hopefully prevent those atrocities from playing out again.
It's an amazing time to be alive,
right?
brother.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is.
We're so lucky to be kind of like at this place where we have the luxury to think about these things, be a
and
part
do
of
things like this for a living. Like I feel so great. I get to nerd out with awesome, smart guys like you all the time.
Yeah, I get to write a book.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, we should really respect the inheritance that our ancestors bequeathed to us and work really hard such that the heritage that goes to our descendants is equally accretive in value. You know, like that's what it needs to be about.
Hopefully exponentially.
Yeah.
So they can live a more moral and loved, you know, and loving life.
Yes.
With more abundance.
More freedom to be more self-actualized as you started all this with. So Noah, man, thank you so much.
Robert, it's been a pleasure. This is a lot of fun.
Yes.
We'll have to do it again. Hopefully I see you at the Bitcoin conference or something.
Yeah, I've not decided if I'll be there, but hopefully
sometime down the road.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you, your work, and your book?
Yeah, cool. I'm on X mostly for thoughts and ideas. It's just at Noah Kaufman MD. I've got one F and one N in my name because there's a lot of different Kaufmans. And then I'm the same on Instagram, where I have like more artistic and photos and stuff. The book Self-Bitcoinization, I actually just bought self-bitcoinization.com, but it'll be on Amazon and it'll be all over the place. It'll be an ebook. And I mean, I appreciate the support and people helping me think through this stuff, all the great people reviewing the book and making commentary. I appreciate you having me on,
of course,
and giving me a platform. And then just all the Bitcoiners out there, you know, like it's just so much fun to meet new people and kind of get more into this world where we really have the potential to make the world a better place. And I think we're all kind of idealistic. So at Noah Kaufman MD and self-bitcoinization.com. And definitely we'll talk to anybody at any point in time. And I love this. And anything that gets us to that end goal quicker, where we can lift people up and all of humanity can be more self-actualized quicker. I think that should be our goal.
Amen to that, brother. It's well said. And thank you for a wonderful conversation. This is great.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.